Maria, you messaged me the other day because you were watching the Volume 4 episode, and you had what can best be described as a galaxy brain insight.
Yeah, so I was watching, and I got to the part where you all were like, yeah, if I was watching this live, like, as it aired, I would be really mad, because it's like, you know, you waited a significant amount of time between Volume 3 and Volume 4. It's like, that's it. And I said it would be like that one episode of SpongeBob with the lost episode, and then Patchy the Pirate is like, that's it! Just a bunch of cheap walk cycles? Ah!
SpongeBob betrayed us! And then he, like, goes around his house,
right.
like...
That is exactly what it was like. You're so correct.
Yeah, just, like, going around his house, like, throwing out all his SpongeBob stuff.
That's it? That's
Volume 4.
That was just a bunch of cheap
Angst scenes.
What a rip!
Rooster Teeth.
Betrayed us! I'm sorry I ever started this stupid fan club in the first place! I'm gonna get rid of all my
RWBY.
stuff! All of it! All of it! All of it! I'm gonna run away! That's what I'll do! Run away! Max and Ruby. Ruby and Max. Ruby and Max. Max and Ruby. Ruby and Max. Max and Ruby. Ruby and Max. Max and Ruby. Ruby and Max.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Max and RWBY, a podcast with slides where people talk about RWBY with me, Max. I am your host, the Red Mage Eldna Doublecast, aka Lana Del Taco. You can find me on both Twitter and Tumblr at Doublecast, spelled with a 5 instead of an S, because I didn't anticipate this YouTube channel getting 110,000 subscribers, so I didn't put time into thinking of a good username. I am joined today by a wonderful panel of guests. When I go to your slide, please let everyone know your name, your pronouns. If you make content, what kind of content do you make, and where people can find you on social media. And, oh, I forgot, I use any pronouns. Any and all, whatever you want, doesn't matter.
Hello, my name's Allie. I also use any and all pronouns. I'm an 3D animation student, and in my spare time, I draw. I have a Twitter and Instagram at Antatee, where I draw a lot of K-pop art. It's probably a phase, but it's not over yet. So you can find me there if you'd like.
Don't worry, Mom. It is, in fact, a phase.
I'm Erin, she, her pronouns. You can find me on Tumblr at 12Clara. Twitter at explosive_sky, and I write on AO3 as Explosive Sky.
I'm Maria. I don't make any content, I just shitpost. My pronouns are she, her. I'm on Twitter at the Queen of Memes and Tumblr at Shitty Winged Eyeliner.
Your content is that picture of that picture of the monkey going around where it's sitting at a computer and the computer is labeled content and then it has two buttons in front of it labeled based and cringe.
Precisely. Also, I have that photo if you want to put it in the slide.
Excellent.
Hey, I'm Pug. I go by she, her pronouns. I work in animation by day and I post bad takes to Twitter by night. You can find me basically anywhere as Capugino.
Excellent. All right, let's just get right into errors and omissions. I want to get through this kind of quickly because there's a lot of stuff here. All right, first of all, there was some disagreement last episode as to who exactly asked Crow to follow Team Ranger around, because I think Margaret said it was Yang, and then I thought it was Tai Yang or something like that. Zonix cleared this up. Nobody asked Crow to follow Team Ranger around. He made that decision himself, but he told Yang in advance so she wouldn't, like, worry about Team Ranger as much, or RWBY specifically, but you know. Also, last episode, I was getting roasted because I referred to the Nuclevi as the wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man, which I insisted was like an established nickname for that enemy within the fandom, and no one else had ever heard of it, or at least no one else had heard anyone other than me use it. Doc, as well as a few other users, backed me up on this and insisted that this has actually been around for a while. And I, did my research, I looked it up, and I found posts going all the way back to 2017 calling it the wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man, and there were, edits of it where it, is doing the exact pose from that Family Guy bit. So, you know what? I feel highly vindicated on that.
That's also a Family Guy bit. I didn't even know that either.
Yeah, that's what it's like one of the 5 good jokes in all of Family Guy is the wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube man bit. Last episode I mistakenly said that this was really more of me talking out of my ass and being wrong. I thought that all of the RWBY eye patch AUs that I'd seen stemmed from Tyrion saying that he'd if he got a chance he'd take Ruby's eye out in Volume 4, since she took one of Cinder's eyes. Turns out, eye patch RWBY AUs have been around all the way since, the beginning of Volume 1, when Ozpin said, "You have silver eyes." I think someone dug up, a future AU from 2013 where RWBY has an eye patch, and so this has been, an established thing from the very beginning.
It's just part of the edgy starter pack, I think. Just gotta have that eye patch to look cool.
Exactly. It's someone else pointed out, they were if RWBY had an eye patch, she'd be one step closer to just being Megumin from Konosuba. I don't entirely agree with, but I'm sure there's a
yeah.
I'm sure
appearance-wise.
I think Mojo Jojo did a Megumin RWBY drawing at some points. They're probably thinking of that. Will and Rack pointed out that because I mentioned sort of offhandedly that Monty didn't want to upgrade to a newer version of Poser. Will and Rack cleared up that was because the newer version of Poser that they were upgrading to changed some shortcuts that he used, so it added more keystrokes to his shortcuts, and he didn't want to do that.
Oh my god.
So that's why Monty put up a thing about not wanting to upgrade.
Come on.
And then finally, Xing Shang Shamalama said that Oscar was able to take the train into Mistral, but Ranger wasn't because Oscar was starting a lot closer to the city. He's out in the country, but where he was out in the country was it was a couple days walk to a train station, and then the train station was pretty close to Mistral already. Yeah, basically Ranger was just starting way farther out, which is the logic for why they couldn't take a train in. And I think they actually mention at some point in Volume 4 that they were supposed to take an airship from Xi'an Village, but Xi'an Village was destroyed, which is why they had to walk the whole way.
Okay.
Whether or not that's satisfying to you, the audience, who knows? I'll take it. It's fine. It's whatever. It's cool. Okay, Volume 5. This volume is, interesting. I'd say, I mentioned in the Volume 2 episode that one is very, hit or miss for me, where the highs are very high and the lows are very low. 5 for me is even more extreme in the sense that it has some of my favorite moments in RWBY and some of my least favorite moments in RWBY. And so it kind of ends up in the middle for me. But yeah, let's see what everyone else has to say. Allie?
Rewatching Volume 5, I realized how much I don't like Volume 5. It's probably what Max said too, where it's probably around my feelings of Volume 2, where there's just a lot of it that I don't like. And there's small glimpses of parts in this. There's some fight scenes, shots in this volume that I really do like a lot. There's a few talks that some of the characters have that I like also. But overall, I just am very underwhelmed by Volume 5.
Erin?
Yeah, so I do agree that it does have some of the best moments and then also some of the worst. I think overall I like it, but I actually couldn't tell you. I feel like I did like it actually a little less than I did in the past. But I think that is also because RWBY is a show that, in my opinion, actually has been getting consistently better. you know, in certain ways. Like, I think that they, especially when you go from like 5 to 6, like it is like a staggering difference. So I think like I have like a sentimental attachment to it. Like, I really love the volume because of, I know, I just like think the fandom was a lot of fun at that time, and like I had really great friends, and like it was just like it was fun to watch the show again. But going back now, there are parts that I'm like, this is unbearable.
Yeah, I feel that. I definitely felt a lot more positive on 5 the first time I watched it than when I rewatched it now. Maria?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Erin in that I think the general trend of RWBY is that it's getting better over time. However, this volume for me is just, I found with my rewatch, a lot of it for me is just kind of skippable because I'm like, yeah, I know what happens. I don't need to watch this all again. And I'm also not a huge fan of like the whole extended fight scene because like pretty much the whole second half of this volume is like one big fight scene. And I'm like, okay, yeah. Like, it's not something that I really want to come back to.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. Pug?
I went back and I checked my power ranking that I finished after we watched everything through the first time, and I rated Volume 5 as the worst Maya season. Okay. So, not favorable, I suppose.
Yeah, that sounds about right for you. All right. Okay, let's just, before we get to dunking on this volume too hard, let's talk about some of the high points, because there are some things to like here. First of all, this is another slower volume. The pace is still pretty relaxed. Lots of, standing around talking. But the upside of that is that we do get like a lot of good character moments, particularly in Blake's plotline. Pug, I feel like you particularly really liked Blake's segments this volume. You want to talk about this a bit?
Sure. I feel like if last volume I was really into what was going on with Yang, this volume I was really into what was going on with Blake. Perhaps that is related to the next slide, but I will hold off on that. I think the idea that Blake feels so guilty about running away, and in this volume is kind of really running towards the issue, is, it's really moving. There's another segment about, good people being capable of making bad choices and always having another choice. I think that's a really powerful lesson for her. But I think the big thing that she learns is that, there really is strength in forgiveness, and kind of holding a grudge isn't really going to do anything for her, isn't really going to empower her on this journey. Not to mention there's just a lot of great cat ear animation that I'm here for.
Oh my god, the ears.
We love the cat ears.
They're very good this volume.
Amazing.
Also, you just made me think of something, but also like with strength and forgiveness, I think something that is really compelling about that message is like it's also internal for her, like learning to forgive yourself. Because obviously she's carrying around so much guilt, like that has been driving her, like the past 2 volumes basically, is all this guilt that she's felt. So I think ending it on that note is just like, it's such a great summary of like her journey.
Yeah, and I think, there are a lot of supporting cast in this journey, but again, it really is something she goes through internally herself, which I think is fantastic. It's another kind of risk that I'm glad RWBY takes in this volume.
It's great to see the progression of her storyline just from the very beginning, and then to everything she kind of went through in Volume 4, to her kind of applying it now with the next slide character with Ilia, because she has gone through a lot, and now she's like in Volume 4 she's kind of learning how to deal with it, and then now she's like actually applying it and moving forward with it, which is a really good progression as a character.
And I also think like Blake has kind of just learned that she actually literally cannot run away from her problems. Like they are there, and like they're in Menagerie. Like she kind of went there to sort of like take a break, and then she was like, well, wait a minute, it's still here. Like, which I just think is like a really interesting, like literal sort of interpretation of like, you can't run away from your problems. Like they're going to be there no matter where you go. And I like that they made it like a physical, tangible thing.
Blake gets a tattoo that says, "I can't drown my demons, they know how to swim."
Oh god.
But yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is it's like her troubles literally follow her to Menagerie, and so she can't run away from them anymore. I think one thing I've said before, and I hold to this, and this volume's a really good example of it, is Blake really does have like the most consistent, like well thought out arc of any character in RWBY, in my opinion. Like specifically starting from volume 1 all the way up to now. Where like all of the themes that have been there from the very beginning are being followed up on now. There's like recurring issues. There's the progression feels very natural, and so it was like we've been through several volumes of basically planting for this big moment of growth for her, and this is the payoff where you see it actually happen, and she actually comes back to the team, which is another highlight of this season, because hey, the gang's back together now.
Oh, yes, that reunion is actually very good. Obviously, as a Bumblebee fan, that was like quite a moment for all of us. And it was about the only thing I saw on my dashboard for like a month.
Oh my god.
But just, the coming back, looking at the room full of people she knows and just being like, Yang, that was really it for me. That did it.
Indeed. Also that like big group hug they have at the end where like they're all getting together, and then Blake is standing and she's like, there's sort of this moment of like, we're all back together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And Yang's
like putting it on Yang's shoulders.
Yeah, and she's like, yeah, we're all back together now. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so sweet.
Yes.
Maria, you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything said.
Lovely.
Nothing really to add.
I do like that Sun is the one that kind of like pushes her towards them. I always think that's like just her team again. Like I always find that moment like very cute.
Oh yeah, I love that he like uses his tail to spin her around. That's really cute.
Sun is such a bro, man. I think
he's great.
I think his sort of like role in Blake's arc as sort of like helping her like open up and sort of overcome some of that like fear and anxiety that's like causing her to make all these like decisions that really like she's only like digging herself in deeper in this way. Like I said in the last episode, him sort of giving her some perspective on this is really nice, and I think makes him a lot of fun to be around. I've said it before, and I will say it again. I like Blake and Sun. I just, don't ship them.
I agree.
It was pointed at this point.
Yes. It's been run into the ground. Allie, you really like the training sequences this volume.
Yeah, I thought it was like a nice... I'm realizing now that I went back and watched the H. Bomber Guy's video about it. I realized that scene is probably more flesh out what semblances are, but I like it as like a window into the characters' lives that we didn't see, where they're talking about stuff that happened to them in the past, and the Ozpin is talking about how like semblances, they are like they find their semblance, and then the semblances grow with them, and then they can change more in the future too. So it's a nice, very like, here's who we were in the past, here we are in the present, and then like in the future, who knows, we can like grow stronger through it too. It was just like a nice speech as they're all like training together. I also just like Oscar, so that's probably also why.
You are the resident Oscar defender.
Yeah, that's me. I was really watching this volume and being like, God, I like Oscar a lot. This is bad. I'm like getting back into that part of the fandom again.
Yeah, I mean, I think for all the complaints about the house, and we'll get into those later, I do think there were a lot of like really nice, quiet moments there that, like we discussed in the last volume, you don't usually get in RWBY because it does tend to move so quickly, particularly in the early volumes, and I think 7 moved pretty quickly as well, I'd say. But yeah, just like a little opportunity to like slow down and just like talk about stuff, lay your feelings out on the table. It's like nice to get those moments from time to time. Like, I think Ruby's conversation with Oscar, where he's just like, how are you okay with any of this? Like, how are you not like losing your mind constantly at like all of the terrible things that you have to go through? Like that whole bit I thought was really interesting. And I think people undersell RWBY's characterization with the idea that like she gets no character development, because rewatching it you can kind of see how she goes from like being like very sort of like really innocent and like childlike in a way, and being, you know, just really like being the Genki girl basically, to her perspective shifting noticeably after the fall of Beacon, where now it's like she still has that element of like relentless positivity, but now it's cached in like the idea of being like the light in the darkness basically, that like the world can be like cruel and unforgiving, but you have to hold out hope in order to like get through it. And I think there is like there's something to be said for that. I don't think she's been like completely shafted on that front, if you like know what you're looking for.
Yeah,
No,
I would kind of agree. I wrote in like the doc replay that the reason I like Oscar and RWBY is because Oscar, at least in this volume, is kind of forcing RWBY to talk about her feelings, because he's like a fish out of water in their like friend group. But my issue with RWBY overall is that when she does like character development, because she has a speech where she's talking with Oscar, where she's saying how like she's really conflicted because she misses her friends a lot that died at Beacon, but she's trying to move forward. A decision like that she's made happened like off screen kind of, and we like didn't get to see her work her way through it mentally, which is kind of I think where the issue with a lot of RWBY's characterization comes in, where she kind of decides it off screen, where she's like, or in her head, she's like, yeah, I'm going to be this person now for like my team, or I'm going to, you know, try to be the strong one and move forward. She doesn't have a moment where she like is having a confrontation or conversation with a character about it. She's just doing it very in her head, which is not good as like a viewer to, it's not very rewarding.
I don't know, because I kind of don't expect anything else from her. Like, I kind of felt that she's set up as a character that way. Like, of course, she is going to continue to be this person and like this leader and try and do the right thing, because that's just like what she's always done. But I think in general, like my issue with people who say that she doesn't have any development is that like I do feel like there's this overarching idea that in order for a character to grow and develop, they have to break in some way, or they need to have such an extreme. So they have to have some kind of struggle or something that they have to be pulled out of, and they have to like grow from that. Or it has to be something so devastating. And I actually really like RWBY, because I think she's managing to grow without that happening to her specifically. Like we've seen her go through some like tough moments, of course, but like, you know, she hasn't had like a Yang moment where Yang was like at the literal like rock bottom, or like Blake moment, or like, and we've seen them grow from things and, you know, in their own ways from that. But I like the opposite happening to RWBY, where she's just sort of, it's like a slower progression, I think, but like it's still there. It's just not in a way I think we're used to seeing.
Maria, do you have thoughts on this?
Sorry, I get nothing that hasn't really already been said.
Yeah. No, I think there is something to be said for like both of those, in the sense that I would like to see, because RWBY doesn't need to necessarily have a breakdown in order for like some of this growth to happen, like for her to move from like very innocent to like slightly more, to be like, you know, positive but aware of like all of the darkness in the world. But like, you know, it would be nice to see a little more of that like play out on screen, even just like, because we talked about in like the first episode or two how like in volume 1 a big part of her character was just being obsessed with weapons, and someone was like, well, it makes sense for her to move on from that, because the whole idea was that she was like fixating on weapons because she couldn't relate to people, but now she has friends, so she can sort of drop that. But it would have been nice to like see that a little bit more, and I feel like this is another example of that. But on the other hand, like, yeah, it doesn't have to be like some big emotional moment. It can be it can still be subtle. It just needs to be there. Though that being said, I do kind of want RWBY to have some sort of like, I kind of want her to go apeshit. I think that'd be fun.
Oh no, I think visually that'd be like really, I mean, just watching it, that would be fascinating and really interesting, obviously. But yeah.
She is no longer baby. Hey Pug, you know what time it is?
Is it time for the best girl, Max?
It's Ilia Amitola loving hours.
Oh, I love her so much.
Acting best girl while Penny is out of commission. Oh my god, I love this gay little chameleon. Pug, you're the Ilia lover in chief. Do you want to just like go off?
Sure. So I felt so guilty saying that I didn't like Volume 5 because that feels tangentially like I'm saying I don't love this character that exists primarily in Volume 5. And that's absolutely not true. She falls into my category of I fell in love with her after about 4 seconds of screen time and I never looked back. Her original "I wanted you to look at me that way" line getting screamed at Blake
Oh
is
my
so
God.
tragic. My heart aches
Ugh.
for her. But I think my real Cat Million rights hour was quit taking pot shots and fight me like you mean it. It is peak sexy. I can't, like, this is peak romance. You can't change my mind. I love it so much. I don't usually like villains that are reluctant heroes or prime for redemption arcs. And Ilia, I'm just going to throw all that out the window because I love you so much. And I'm so glad to see you kind of grow and realize that, yeah, good people sometimes make bad choices, but it is possible to make the good choice and, you know, go back to the side that you were meant to be on. I will forgive you for having a redemption arc. She is one of the characters in the White Fang that actually feels satisfying in a way. I mean, I can see why she identifies with the White Fang, and I can see why she makes the choice to leave it, as opposed to this kind of weird black and white depiction of the White Fang that exists throughout the rest of the series. She's just so cute and lovely. How can everyone not love her?
Yeah, I think Ilia, like you said, is one of the few elements of the whole White Fang plotline that actually does work. Like, there is, like, her, like, sort of internal struggle feels a lot more compelling than a lot of, like, the kind of vague gesturing that people do towards, like, using violence, using versus being peaceful. Like, her example feels like a lot more concrete and, you know, thus more compelling from the audience perspective, which is something I wish they had done for the rest of the show, but it is nice we get, like, a little bit of that here.
Yeah, I remember the very first time I watched Volume 5, I came out of it liking Ilia a lot. And then when I came back to rewatch it, I was going through it and being like, wow, I'm not really liking her very much. I wonder like why I liked her so much the first time. But I think it's cause and I say like because like when I finished Volume 5, I came out liking her again. And I think it's because she just has a very like well-deserved redemption arc. And it's really amazing because it's falling in line at the same time as like Blake is going through, like we were talking before, like applying um her like new way of like working with people. You're seeing like Ilia as like a character that Blake is trying to help, and it just feels very satisfying to see it through almost through Blake's lens of you know the strength and forgiveness, where you as a viewer are also like going through the same thing almost that Blake is at the same time. It feels very, very satisfying.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, and I actually love Ilia. And I think what's really interesting about her too is I actually never considered her a villain, or even at the time considered her a villain. She's so misguided and like has obviously been through an extreme trauma that it's sort of like hard for me to put her in that box. Like the whole time I was watching, I literally just like, oh, Ilia, you were just like so misguided. Like you were misdirecting so much emotion right now in
Yeah.
entirely wrong ways. But it's like you always know that that potential for her to do the right thing is there. Like I don't feel like I had a moment where I was like, Ilia is not going to turn this around. Like you can kind of just feel it that something is going to get through to her because she's just like almost in a state of like hopelessness. And I think the minute she has hope, which I actually think is the entire theme of RWBY, so I think this is like incredible to sum up in like one character here, is just like, yeah, like you said, it's like incredibly satisfying.
Indeed.
And it's all happening on screen. We have this neat little arc that kind of is nestled into Volume 5 that we have a really nice progression where a lot of things, you know, we were complaining about like, oh, I wish this had more screen time. I wish we got to see this development. Ilia gets that time, and I think that's part of why it's so satisfying.
Yeah,
When when she stands up with Blake, it's like, I'll go with you to defend my heart. I felt it in my heart.
Ah, so nice. Maria, did you have like strong feelings on Ilia the first time you watched this through?
Not really. I kind of agree that like I always kind of it's pretty obvious that she's gonna get some kind of redemption at some point, so it's hard to see her as like a full-fledged villain. I remember because she's the first like LGBT representation on screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I remember being like, oh, that's because I remember Max told me like, oh, like it's coming, there's someone, and it's like, oh, it's Ilia. Okay.
Yeah, I think the barking up the wrong tree line is funny.
Oh yes.
Oh, I love that
that's
one.
such a good line. Oh, not this volume, but it's incredible.
We'll get into that in the Volume 6 episode, which is going to be like 4 hours long.
Also, the I forget if this is 4 or 5. This is definitely 5. It's like the Blake character short, which is like honestly kind of the Ilia character short.
It is absolutely the Ilia character short.
Yeah. I liked her little monologue in that.
Yeah. Fun fact, this was okay, I could not find a source for this. So this may be just like pure speculation. Some people have speculated that part of the reason that like Volume 5 feels like so slow and there's like not a lot of progression in the story is because apparently Rooster Teeth might have like Gynaxed themselves. Like they spent a ton of money on those character shorts and then they were under budget for Volume 5 and so they had to like skimp in a lot of places.
Oh, that's funny. I've never heard that.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh god, someone's probably going to come out with a source against this or something.
Someone's going to be like, Max, you're canceled. What's wrong with you?
God, nobody gets canceled on this podcast. People listen to it while they sleep. I already explained this.
I don't know. I'm going to test the limit this episode.
I'm going to push it to the limit. Also, as a final note before we move on from Ilia, hot take, Catmelion, not by any means the best ship in RWBY, the most underrated ship in RWBY. Like, for how much there is there relative to how much Catmelion content exists.
That's actually true, yeah.
Like, there's so few Catmelion fics, and I don't think there's been a Catmelion week in, like, years. My crops are dying, please. So, yeah.
Was everyone already turned on to Bumblebee at this point? And had no chance. You know,
It was not just Bumblebee, it was that Freezer Burn is also a pretty popular ship.
It was the height of Freezer. Oh man, can't wait till we get to that discourse.
Monochrome has like a pretty strong following. Even Ladybug has a strong following. They keep to themselves and they're like really nice and like not argumentative about it, but there is a lot of them. So yeah, there were basically like both Blake already had so many ships that like
more ships than anyone.
Yeah, like
Blake has so many actual like in-show romantic interests too by this point.
Yes, and then of course Sun, who I just completely forgot about because I'm a stupid doo-doo ass who only ships fem/. But yeah, like Blake has so many existing ships that were really popular that it like, you know, Catmelion would have had to like pull people away from a ship they already liked, and I guess there just weren't a ton of people who were ready to literally jump ship.
Well, here's the time, guys. Rethink those actions. Ilia's a fantastic character.
They put her with Weiss. I mean, I personally don't, but I know that that's like a popular
one.
Like,
prismatic ponytails.
Even though they've like literally never spoken, I love it. I think it's like the crackest thing. It's great.
It's a ridiculous crack ship, but I kind of love it.
Yeah.
I do kind of feel for. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I do kind of feel for Ilia though with the that her like affection for Blake, because like we already have Black Sun established. We already have Bumblebee just like in the canon. It kind of just has to be unrequited.
But this is
like no more room. We'd add them like too much.
Like we just know it's not gonna happen.
It's like Mahiru in Review Starlight, if anyone's seen that.
I hate you so much.
You have a type, Pug. You have a type.
Yes. It's the sad underdog.
But yeah, yeah. Oh man, get Ilia a GF for the love of God.
The next time we see her, she has one.
Seriously.
Oh, hey guys, you know what time it is? It's time for Maiden Bowl. This was people love to talk shit on the fights in Volume 4 and 5, and I defended the fights a little bit in 4. In 5, there is only one fight I will defend, but I will defend it very hard, and it's Maiden Bowl.
Yes.
This was a lot of fun to watch. First of all, the Raven Maiden reveal fucks. It fucks severely.
You're so correct.
Sorry?
You're so correct. Like,
Yes.
You're right.
I loved it.
It was incredible. It was like mind-blowing.
I think
It was actually a twist that like I didn't see coming at
I
all.
didn't
and
either.
was
I know.
really
It was the same
surprised by it.
one.
it is the best
Oh.
kind of twist because they were like dropping what in retrospect are very obvious hints the whole time, but you don't put the pieces together until the big reveal, and then it's like, oh, of course, how could I miss this?
Mm-hmm.
I forget, Pug, did you guess this?
I did.
Oh, right. Because you guessed literally everything.
Yeah, because I could write for the show, so I guessed everything.
Oh, man. Maria, I feel like you were the one who put this on the slide. Do you just want to like talk about this, or?
Really cool. It's one of those, you're totally right. It's one of those things where like, I mean, I didn't see it coming. But then obviously when you look back, it's like she's wearing a mask all the times. The Maiden powers are present. And I just love the way it's revealed, like with her eyes light up and she's like, I am. And then it just cuts.
I'm the Spring Maiden.
That was so good.
Yeah, super cool.
God.
Oh, also the fact that it is technically, I mean, I say technically because this is obviously not 100% or anything like that, but the way it's to some degree setting up like Yang to be the future Spring Maiden, let's talk about that. Or let's not. Let's just think about it.
That's a theory.
It's a great theory.
Extremely spicy.
Very.
That's getting into like volume, oh god, who even knows?
It's like volume 11 or something.
Yeah. That's a ways off if it even is a
Yeah.
thing.
100%.
That might be an Atlas ball situation. Yeah, I think the helmet is really cool as like a fun way to like hide it. Okay, in terms of like the actual fight, there were a few things that stuck out to me as like what makes this fight different from like all the other ones we've seen this volume. And I think the key for me is like there was a lot of like really good particle effects in terms of like utilizing the Maiden powers and making them look really big and explosive. There was a lot of really cool use of like environmental effects. So when they're like jumping around on the falling rocks, that added like a really dynamic element to like the movement that made it like a lot more exciting and fun to watch. Like they got like pretty creative with like all the different like powers they can use. I loved like seeing like Raven switch around her stupid multicolor pen sword gun thing, where you can just like see her switching to different elements for various attacks, which is really a nice little detail. Allie, you're like the fight scene connoisseur here. Did you have like strong feelings on Maiden Bowl?
I'm kind of conflicted with it because from a story standpoint, I don't like this fight like at all because I personally do not like Raven or Cinder. And to me they're both villains. So the emotional story weight of this fight does not mean much to me because it's kind of like don't really care for either character, and also they're both villains, so if the relic gets into either of their hands, it doesn't really like change the plot too much. I think as like an actual just fight outside of the context of the story, it's kind of successful. My issue is that, and it's kind of been an issue I had with like the Maidens in general, is that they're each assigned to like a certain season, but their season they're assigned to doesn't reflect like the powers that they have at all. Like they both use fire and ice magic and lightning magic, and so like there's really like no differentiation between their like abilities, which kind of makes it not a very satisfying fight for me. I do like the way they make use of the setting in this fight because there's like the rocks fall, they jump on the flying rocks and do a fight there. I think the animation itself is like pretty like fun and dynamic, but the thing you mentioned with like the switching sword color like element is cool, but they don't like visually like show it very well. I think like I only like there are parts in that fight where I notice, oh, her sword's yellow now, but like I don't know what that means in terms of like what she's doing in the fight now. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like I think that it's a fight that suffers from not being set up very well previously, where like here are their power sets, here's what they can do with them. I don't really even know what Raven's weapon is except a sword. So it's, I don't know. It's just not a fight that like was very technically set up very well, I think, before it happened.
Yeah, I think you do raise some valid points about, like, I do wish that the Maiden powers were more distinct in terms of, like, each Maiden can do a specific thing. I think that would make the fights more interesting. Like, I get they want them to just be really, really powerful, but because of that, they end up making them all the same, which is, like, one of the weaknesses of the Maiden bullfight.
I will say the end shot where Raven just like freezes Cinder as she's falling, that's like a pretty fucking awesome shot.
Oh, I love that.
I think that's like a really cool, like a slow death and she just like falls into the long pit. I think that's like an amazing shot, personally.
Dude, watching Cinder get owned will never not be fun.
So good.
It is very satisfying.
I like Cinder a lot, but I also like watching her get owned.
I'm like at the point where I'm over Cinder, so it's like, but just in present, like I think when I watched this, I was kind of more like whatever, but now I'm so over Cinder that this fight was so satisfying because I was just like, Raven, beat her ass, please just beat her ass, like she needs it so bad.
Get her ass.
Like get her ass, girl.
Oh my god. But yeah, we have
Like been owned. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, especially like up to including all the volumes of RWBY, I feel like Cinder has just been owned so many times at this point. It's like, girl.
Yeah, like, why is
this
a meme? But like, it's definitely Cinder also.
It's also like, the fact is like, you're so right. Like she's been owned every single volume and somehow she still is this cocky. I'm like, bitch, what are you so cocky about? Like you're literally getting fucked up every volume.
Yeah. It's like with the silver eyes too.
Yeah.
It's like she had
getting ragged.
She had like a couple big wins in volume 3 before RWBY used the silver eyes. And she's just been coasting off that. Cause like if it weren't for that, she'd almost be at like Roman status where it's like you might as well just make her like a Team Rocket villain where she just comes in, does some wacky antics, and then gets launched into the stratosphere. Pug, do you have thoughts on this fight?
Sure, I like both of these characters. I like both of these characters fighting. I like both of these characters stepping on me. There's a lot to like here. I do have a little bit of a desire for Cinder to be... I think I made a joke about this in volume 2, that I don't like Cinder because she's not a capable villain. She keeps sliding right under the radar there. But I think the banter in this is particularly fun. I think it does a lot for their characterizations. Yeah,
just watching, I mean, and this is even, like, going back to the scenes at the camp, like, just watching Raven ruthlessly shit on Cinder at every opportunity is amazing.
Oh, it's fantastic. No, this is like I think this is the most fun fight, obviously, especially as this volume's fights are pretty weak. I would say aside from, like, Yang beating up all the bandits.
Yeah.
Like, and I think... I don't know if it's like this setting that they promised, because like that obviously we're gonna get into like the big multi-episode fight in like one room, but like they really just had so much more to work with down in this vault. Like it's so good, and it's clearly like a strength of theirs, or like something that they had plotted so hard that they got there and they were like, yes, time to pour everything into this fight.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It was a very different point, so if you want to keep going.
And I was just gonna say, like, I feel like there's a lot to appreciate about this, especially considering, like, I love Raven at the end saying you should have watched your back and Vernal shooting her.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That is such an incredible moment, I think.
That's really satisfying.
Yeah.
I also think getting to see Raven and Cinder through not Yang and RWBY's eyes, which are, like, very much seeped in trauma, and it kind of makes them unreliable narrators in a way, is interesting, because these two see each other for how they are, right? Like...
Yeah.
They see the shortcomings in the other character. They don't see them as these like looming evils or this unknown element, and I think that's really satisfying.
They both.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, they both look at each other as like fucking posers. Like that's how they see the other.
Yeah.
They have kind of the same opinion of each other.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Oh God, what was I? Did I have another point here? I'm trying to remember. Yeah. I remember, because Erin was saying something about, like, you know, they sort of poured all their effort into this. I think that by this point, because there were, like, growing pains with, like, having to deal with, like, the loss of Monty and then Shane after that, and just having to completely, basically reshuffle the whole animation team because they lost their 2 leads. Like, the fights were the things that they were having the hardest time adjusting to, and I think they are always more comfortable with 1v1 fights.
Yes.
I think like
definitely.
the fights that like really land are usually like extended 1v1s, and so this is the first chance they've had to like really get in on that. Because even in like the group fights, like when Yang beats up all the bandits, she's doing like the video game thing where they all charge her one after the other, just so you can see her do like a couple cool moves here, a couple cool moves there. You know, that's just sort of like where their strengths are at this moment, and you know, they really played into them here. Couple other high points before we move on to the airing of grievances. First of all, the whole sequence with Weiss in the airship is a lot of fun. Pilot Boy was like a huge meme on the subreddit when he debuted. Everyone loved him since basically his first appearance. Interesting fun fact about Pilot Boy is originally they were going to give him a throwaway line where he mentions having like a husband back home because they wanted like more gay representation, and then they realized that they kill him off like 3 episodes after they introduce him, and they were like, that seems that's a bad idea. So I guess points for self-awareness. I don't know.
They got there in the end. They were like,
points for not doing that.
Maria, I think you were the one who put the Pilot Boy bullet point on here. Do you have thoughts?
Oh yeah, I just love the meme.
Yeah, the memes are great.
Best boy.
Also, Weiss hitting the
Officially,
dab.
no. Actually, yes.
Yeah. So much mileage out of that format. I think I've seen that one used almost as much as no, what you said was stupid from volume 3. But yeah, also like we'll talk a little bit later about like Weiss getting owned, but that scene at the end of like the fight with her and the Lancers where the knight is like jumping around off all of the like glyphs, like slicing the Queen Hornet or the Queen Lancer from different angles, kind of slaps. I like that one a lot. Another nice thing is like Weiss and Yang get some time to interact this volume, which I feel like they didn't get that much of up to this point. And like it gets real. There's like some real emotion there. You really feel it. This is the real freezer burn hours.
Yeah, I think like this volume obviously has very poor pacing, but I think because of that, it gives us time for these like smaller conversations that actually do hold a lot of weight. And I mean, obviously that conversation between Weiss and Yang is like pivotal in, I think, them understanding each other and also like us as the audience understanding, especially Yang's motivations. Because obviously Yang just like assumes that Weiss has never been lonely in the same way. And like, while she's right, she clearly doesn't get the full extent of that. And I think it's like just seeing that moment where they sort of, Weiss sits beside her and they just sort of understand each other was very sweet. Like, honestly, something we hadn't really seen from them before.
Yeah. And I think it's moments like that that like I think made me a lot more positive on volume 5 the first time I watched it through, because I was like, man, like this is the kind of like emotionality I didn't think this show would ever give me, but like, you know, there's like it's hitting me in the feels, you know.
Absolutely.
Pug, Allie, Maria, any thoughts?
I'm apparently very suggestible because watching it this time around, I was like, freezer burn, making some points.
I like the idea of their relationship here. I struggle with the same way I struggle with like Yang's characterization like last volume though, where I don't really like the way it was delivered, mostly in the conversation that like Weiss and Yang have, because I like the kind of idea of the conversation where they're both talking about the ways they were like lonely and then how that ties into like Yang's feelings towards Blake. But I don't like the way it's like Yang like kind of like lets all her like emotions out on Weiss, and then Weiss is like, okay, let me tell you my problems, and then then it ties in and gets better where there's like, this is how it's relating to Blake. But I just don't like the way it's very like feels like not a conversation. It feels like a one-way like monologue to each other about their own issues. And then it like starts to get better by the end of it. I don't know. It just felt like a situation where like if I was someone that was like telling someone I'm going through some issues right now, and then they told me, here are my issues, I don't know if I would like appreciate it very much.
I kind of feel like Weiss had to do that though, because to like be relatable, because because I think, I mean, this is just how I interpreted it, but like my feeling was that Yang almost did not want to talk to Blake to Weiss, because she was like, there's no way you are going to actually understand how I feel. So I almost feel like Weiss had to be like, no, I will, because this is what has happened to me. And then Yang opened up. Like, I almost feel like if Weiss hadn't done that, there would have been no conversation. Because
I just wish it didn't feel like a monologue in like the dialogue. I wish it felt like a conversation that they were having back and forth. Yeah, I know. I totally agree. I think you're totally right. They Weiss had to establish like her own backstory in order to be able to relate to Yang. I just think the actual like execution of that conversation was not super strong.
I can see that. One other highlight of these two being together for a little bit is one of my favorite lines in the show. Your mom kidnapped me? You kidnapped her?
Shining moment.
I really like the reveal. Like when she when Yang punches that guy into the park.
Yeah.
And then
it's so good. Yeah.
It's very good.
It's like, well, subtlety's out the window. Giant knight bursts out of the cage. Oh, man. Great scenes. Other nice things is that I don't know if the animation people noticed this, but I thought I picked up on like some subtle but noticeable improvements in both the lighting and the sound design this volume. I feel like there were a lot of moments where they did like more interesting things with the light, where like specifically in like the first episode where you see like the light coming through the windows in like Lionheart's office that casts like a really nice effect. I thought that was cool. I thought like they did a lot of fun stuff with like the sort of, you can hear like there are parts where Yang like stretches and you can hear like the mechanical arm like clicking a little bit. Just like subtle little additions like that I think go like a long way to making the show feel a lot more polished and professional.
Agreed. Yeah, the mechanical arm sound effects are really, really good whenever Yang like moves it. I think and they know like where to use it like strategically too.
Yeah, we're definitely settling into Maya this season.
Good stuff. Maria, you specifically wanted to talk about Oscar because you thought his voice actor did a really good job.
Yeah, Erin Dismuke did a really good job of portraying like Oscar and Ozpin Oscar. Also, like the animation between when he switches is very clear, so he definitely feels like two different people. And I just thought that was really well done.
Yeah, it's like very subtle changes, but you can definitely notice them, which I think is pretty impressive because, again, this show normally does not deal in subtlety.
I want to point something out, even though it's not totally related only to Volume 5, but I watched like some clips of Volume 7, and it's interesting seeing how more like they're like blending together, like acting-wise in Volume 7, because they're kind of starting to become, like Oscar and Ozpin are kind of starting to, I guess, fuse more and more together. But here they're like so still like very different. So the way they act is just like so clearly like two different people in the same body.
Yeah. Just like jumping up on the chair and then switching back and then immediately falling off of it. All right. It's time to air some grievances. Let's get into it. First of all, the infamous Battle of Haven. I feel like when people talk about the fights in RWBY not being as good as they used to be, this is always the example they go to, and for good reason. I defend the fights in newer RWBY, but I will not defend this one. It's bad. It is not good. I think the core of the issue here for me is that it reminds me of watching like DBZ or Naruto, where they'd have a fight that was stretched out over like 7 episodes, where they'd like fight for a little bit and then they'd stop and then they'd like go into their backstory or like threaten each other or just like trade words back and forth, and then they'd fight for a little bit more and then it would cut to something else and then it would cut back and then they'd fight like a little, but just like a tiny bit at a time. Like you're progressing like very, very incrementally to the point where like the only way to like enjoy the fight is to like watch like a super cut of it on YouTube where they like actually string it together properly, where it just feels very, very disjointed. And there isn't a lot of momentum to it, and it makes it feel very weak. Allie, again, you're the fight scene connoisseur here. You want to just like engage in the Comedy Central roast of Rooster Teeth animation.
Yeah. So the thing you pointed out is that where like there's like a loss of momentum every time they have to like stop and talk. But I think another huge issue is that this fight is taking place in this huge room. and every character is fighting like another character. And almost every character who's paired up with someone is not fighting like a person that they have like a lot of emotional investment towards. Like, it's so weird to me, and this is my my hating on Jean hours. It's so weird to me that Jean is the one that fights Cinder at the beginning, because the whole reason Cinder's doing this is because she is actually trying to like probably kill RWBY. And it's so weird that she's like, oh yeah, I'll just fight this dude I don't recognize. And I'm so
Even
like,
Cinder is like, who are you?
Okay, that is the best line. No, Cinder, him giving that whole ass speech and like weeping, and Cinder just like, who are you again? Like, what an icon in that one moment. Like, I really don't like it the rest of the time, but that was it.
That
like,
is that is the best part of this fight, is Cinder
100%.
just brutally dragging Jean into the ground.
Yeah, he has main character syndrome. She had to put him in his place.
Put him in his place, Cinder.
This ain't fanfiction.net, Jean. You're not the main character.
Yeah, I don't know. And then there's like an issue where the characters like will like swap who they're fighting also, so it gets kind of confusing who is fighting who. And because this room doesn't like, they don't like stick like into like one section of the room well enough for me to be like, okay, this fight is happening here and this fight is happening over here. And I don't think they just make good use of like the space of the room either.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not great.
It's just like not cohesive, like at all. Any part of it. You're just like, what is going on? And why does nobody care about, like, it was just so weird. Like, they just like leave certain characters alone for a period of time, and then like I always like laughed at Jean trying to heal Weiss and then being like, we need protection, as if anybody was even looking at them. Like, nobody gave a shit anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, it's just, it was totally disjointed.
Yeah.
It also doesn't feel like they're fighting. Obviously, they're fighting over something, but it very much has this "we're fighting for the sake of fighting" feel. I mean,
definitely.
They are trying to make sure no one eventually will go after Cinder and Raven, but even when that's happening, there's only like a moment of Emerald being like, I won't let you get down there. That reminds me that that's actually what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then,
you know what? Sorry, continue.
Yeah, but thankfully, no one seems to care when somebody goes down, and will give them the appropriate amount of time to recover.
Oh my god.
I think John does say something like, oh, we need cover, and Nora and Ren do provide cover. But still, it's like, they're giving them so much. It feels like they're fighting for the sake of fighting, and then when someone goes down, there's just this terrible like lapse in the momentum that just makes you completely forget what we're doing here. I mean, why? Like, Lionheart is fighting, but why? He's kind of just standing at the top doing nothing, and then there's long periods of time where Nora won't be doing something because she's too OP to have fight the whole time. I don't know. It's very frustrating.
No, and you also just made me think, like, I think that's another big problem, is that, like, nobody's actually fighting for the same reason. Right. Like, Hazel's there because he's pissed at Ozpin. So he's like, I'm going to kill this little child who is Ozpin. And then you have, like, Emerald and Mercury who are, you know, doing it for Cinder or whatever. Lionheart's just kind of like, I don't know what's going on, but I have my Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel thing, and I'm going to do, I don't know, he doesn't do shit except die eventually.
Oh my god, it absolutely is a dual disc, you're right.
It totally is. Like, that's exactly what it looks like. But it's like nobody's even, like, literally nobody seems to know exactly what, like, why are they there fighting. Like, it's all just these different reasons that you kind of have to keep track of, and then you're very confused the whole time.
I think it's interesting to contrast this fight with RWBY versus Aesop's in Volume 7, because that was another fight where it's like a big team against a big team, but in that one, it feels like really cohesive and really satisfying, not just because like the actual animation of the fights is more dynamic and there's more interesting things going on instead of just like, I'm gonna hit you with my sword a little bit and then talk. But also because like it's like a lot faster paced. They keep it moving. They're constantly cutting between the different people, but not to like pause to talk about stuff. They have everyone sectioned off in like different rooms, so you get like there's variety in like the environments for each fight. And like, yeah, all of that is severely lacking here. But I think it shows that they like did sort of learn from their mistakes and find ways to like, you know, have a whole bunch of people fight each other. And like there was like conversations in the middle of that fight as well, but they're a lot more sparse and like brief, so they don't break up the action in the same way, where it feels like, pause, I have to be emotional for a second, okay, let's get back to it. Another issue with this fight is that there are moments that are clearly supposed to be emotional, and I'm mostly just talking about Weiss getting impaled here, where, like, it just doesn't land at all. It just feels lame. Like, Cinder walks away from her fight with Jean for a moment, like, really slowly, too. Like, it feels like they're giving her all the time in the world to do this. Tosses her spear, and it's like... I feel like at no point in that do you think anything actually bad is going to happen, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't feel impactful in the way that, like, all of the bad shit in Volume 3 does, because it's like, well, obviously Weiss isn't gonna die. Like, it just it doesn't have the same weight to it, and it feels kind of wimpy.
It was literally like, Weiss gets impaled, and then the second she gets impaled, I realized what Jean's semblance was gonna be. I wasn't even like, oh no, Weiss got stabbed. I was like, oh, Jean's gonna be able to heal her. That's like the semblance.
I know. I'm like like, I think that's the thing, is like, I kind of wonder, like, what was the intention? Because clearly the intention was not, like, obviously, Weiss is not gonna die. Like, we're all aware. The show's called RWBY. Like, what are they gonna do? Remove the W? You know what I mean? Like, she's clearly not going to die. So I'm like, well, what was the intention? Because I was shocked at the time. Like, I remember watching it and being shocked, but not worried. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it worked in the way of
purely, I think it was very purely like a plot device for Jean to unlock his semblance, which is such a shame. I remember watching this fight with Weiss against Vernal, and Vernal is such like a not a character, really.
God, yes, the fact that she loses to
Weiss,
Vernal.
It's because, oh my god, wait, I was watching this with my girlfriend, we were talking about it. It's because Weiss is a support player. Like, she's a support character. If she has one other person, she is good. But by herself, she's like, bitch, I don't know.
And now Jean is the support character, so it just feels more.
We got two supports.
God.
Jean is like the healer. Weiss is like different kind of support. Buff. Yeah, she's the buff. Exactly.
Yeah, she's the that makes sense.
Also, now I'm thinking about it, there's actually one thing I do like about Jean unlocking his semblance, not just here, just like in general, and like you said, he like main character syndrome. Like, I really enjoyed that they were like, actually no, like, Jean is the healer. Like, have fun, everybody who had these ideas about Jean, but actually he is literally support.
I'm just tired of characters I like being sacrificed for Jean's character development.
Oh, R.I.P. Oh, God. I feel so bad for Pyrrha. Yeah. Also, fun fact about Jean's semblance is that it was actually spoiled in Grim Eclipse. Yeah, so
really?
if I recall correctly, the story goes that they weren't, like, entirely sure what they wanted Jean's semblance to be in the early volumes. But when Grim Eclipse came out, okay, I mean, Erin, you've actually played the game. Can you play as, like, all of Team RWBY and Juniper?
Yeah, no, you can play as all of RWBY and Juniper.
Okay, yeah, so basically, like, everyone else has a semblance, so it's like, well, we can't just not give Jean one, and they were like, well, no one else can heal, so why don't we just give him that? And then the writers for the show were like, actually, you know what?
Great idea, Grim Eclipse.
Fuck it, it's going in the show. It's like how there's a whole bunch of, like, Pokemon moves that were, like, dumb shit they made up for the trading card game first, and then they recursively added it to the actual games.
Very good.
I always find that funny. We touched a little bit on, like, the meme of Weiss losing all her fights. Yeah, actually, I think we've discussed that. It's a whole thing at this point. They get over it, but I think this was the volume where it really became, like, it got stupid, because it's not just...
It just hurt to see her, like, the whole time she's fighting Vernal, she's trying to summon her knight, and I'm like, just stop trying to summon your knight. Come on, it really felt like watching, like, a video game, like someone else was playing, where they're just, like, trying to summon, and you're like, can't summon in a 1v1.
Yeah, you can't use, like, the
you
long...
literally can't. You do not have time, Weiss, come on.
The long casting time spell that keeps getting interrupted.
Yes.
And then also, I like the fact that she, like, wins against the Lancer, but then the ship crashes anyway. It's like, even when she wins, she can't get a fucking break. Also, while we're on the topic of bad fights, the fight at the Belladonna Mansion, while not nearly as egregious as this one, also feels a little weak.
There is a really good moment between Ilia and Sun fighting that is just executed really well. Rewatching it, I was like, wow, they both have distinct fighting styles. The sound design is really great. But besides that flicker of a moment, I agree with you.
I agree. That one shot, I was like, wow, that's so good, and then it like stopped, and I was sad. I do like I actually do like some of the shots of Oscar fighting in this in the Haven battle. I think he feels like he has kind of a distinct fighting style in that he's like fighting very like clumsily. It feels very like Sora Kingdom Hearts, where he's just like whacking someone with a blunt object. That's kind of like comical because it's a cane also. But that was like one other part in the Haven battle where I felt like the again, it was like in between all the talking, suddenly there's like a fight happening and then it stops again.
Yeah.
I just like that Blake is the one who sets the house on fire and then is like, "We did this." Like,
sorry, Dad.
Like, girl, you did that. Like, that was all you. Like, 100%.
God.
Who's the we?
That's a you problem.
Don't even get me started. Though I will say, having them fight in the burning house did look cool, but
sure did.
Yeah, they get points for style, if nothing else. All right. One sort of recurring thing that came up a lot when we were writing out the planning doc is that the villains this volume feel particularly wimpy in a lot of different ways. Allie, as the resident Cinder hater, talk a little bit about like why she just does not work this volume.
I had problems with Cinder since she was introduced, but now it's becoming like worse and worse because you still don't know her motivation or backstory. And then, like I was saying earlier, her whole kind of reason where she agrees to like fight against Crow and the rest of the students is because she wants to get back at RWBY, and then she totally ignores RWBY, and it's kind of like, what is the point of that? You clearly had like no plan at all. And it just doesn't help that, again, every time she tries to like, I don't know, do one of these big like school battles where she's like trying to destroy the school or get the relic, she just completely fails, but she still like thinks she's hot shit. And I'm like, it's just like not compelling. Like you're like Team Rocket. You're not like at this point. She's not like a compelling villain. And I think RWBY just has this issue where all their villains feel very like unsuccessful. Like they just like can't do the thing that they got assigned to do. They just fail like so constantly that it's kind of hard to see them as threatening. And that's like a huge issue I just have with Cinder. She just doesn't feel threatening to me. Even though she has all this power, like every single time she gets stopped by RWBY, or in this case by Raven, and it's just, I don't know, she's just not a very threatening person as a villain. Villains, I think, should feel like they are like powerful and like stronger than the heroes in a lot of cases, but like the heroes, I don't know, it's like their teamwork or their heart that like pushes them to defeating the villains. And I just like don't feel that Cinder even like when they tried to fight Cinder, they even need anything like that, because RWBY just like uses her silver eyes and then Cinder falls to the ground.
Pug, you've talked a bit before about this. Do you have thoughts on Cinder here?
Sure. Can I talk about like the villains as a whole?
Yeah, sure.
So I think I am a big fan of villains in general, not the villains in this series. I think this is kind of two sides of the same coin that we haven't quite hit on the other one yet. The villains are poorly motivated, poorly executed, not relatable. I think this stems from a fear of, if you make the villains, you know, morally gray, that actually reflects on the heroes a little bit more as well, because it makes their intentions not as clear. It's not so good versus evil. It's, you know, people making mistakes versus people making mistakes. And I think RWBY is just so afraid of touching on this middle ground, which I actually think is where all the really good crunchy writing for villains is. So like, yeah, I wish Cinder was more than she was, but I think making Cinder motivated and making Cinder kind of valid in a way or relatable in a way would reflect poorly on RWBY and in just a way that they're not willing to do. I mean, Salem kind of represents this big looming evil. Like, she's not tangible. She's kind of just conceptually evil. And the way to execute that well is to fill the mid ground with all of these like really crunchy villains that we can kind of sink our teeth into. And RWBY gives us exactly none of that. I mean, Hazel is a great example. Cinder's a great example. Adam's a great example. I just wish one of them was fully fleshed out in a satisfying way. And I have hope that that could still be Cinder, but it is not currently. She's very...
They've been giving us crumbs. They keep hinting at there being something with Cinder, but we just haven't gotten there.
I'm curious. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, I actually completely disagree, just because I'm actually sick to death of morally gray villains. I feel like they have been the most popular type of villain for so long now, to the point that it is exhausting. Like, there is never just, like, an evil or bad character, which I do think, like, those people do exist. Like, people who are just not good people and have bad motivation, or, you know, and like want to cause harm, like those are real people that are out there. And I feel like just in media for so long now, that has been actually avoided, where it's been like, no, actually this villain who did something that should have been unforgivable, look at their reasoning, here's their motivation, here's what they have been through in their life. So actually, no, viewer, you are wrong. And this person, like, I'm just so tired of seeing that. And I actually find it really refreshing in a lot of ways that a lot of the villains in RWBY are just evil. Like, I think Cinder actually is going to be different. Like, I think we're going to see her backstory, and though I don't think it's going to be redeeming of her in any way, I think it's going to explain a lot of her, which I think will be interesting. I find Salem, bizarrely enough, to be a very interesting villain who kind of fills that void, because, like, I mean, her, obviously this is a later volume, but like her whole backstory was extremely sympathetic. Like, they could not have made her a more sympathetic character than what they did with her backstory. I think Hazel is super weak. I completely agree with that. I think, like, obviously Emerald is going to get redeemed. Like, she's got a lot going for her there. And I guess my biggest take on this is with Adam, is like, I think they actually did a really good job in making Adam just like a fucked up evil dude. Like, I had no interest ever in seeing him be redeemed in any way or having him be relatable in any way. Like, I think he has suffered, and I think they actually hinted at that, obviously, in 6. But I think the fact that they have been like, there is nothing that can excuse Adam's behavior and the things that he has done is actually extremely refreshing. It's something we really do not see a lot anymore.
Yeah, I think maybe I misspoke when I said morally gray. I think villains can be evil and do evil things and not be worthy of redemption arcs. I have a genuine squick for the word redemption arc now. It drives me absolutely crazy.
It's getting a little overused.
It's getting really overused. I totally agree.
I feel like we need to add Zuko redemption arc to like the list of like tweets I see every week, along with like I don't know, bisexuals can't sit in chairs correctly or whatever. It's just like you're just making the same post over and over again until we die.
I feel like maybe a lot of shows that paint heroes and villains as like, these are the good people and these are the abusers, it's a very disingenuous situation, as much as Tumblr would like things to be kind of painted in that scenario. But I mean, I don't want Adam to be redeemable. I don't want Cinder to be redeemable, but I want their actions to track. I want their motivations to track. I want to know what's the thing that makes them wake up in the morning and do these terrible things. I don't want to necessarily feel sorry for them, and I don't necessarily want to go into discourse about like, oh, it's actually okay for this character to kill all of these people because of this terrible thing that happened to them. But I definitely think villains deserve the same sort of well thought out backgrounds that heroes do, even if we don't necessarily want them to go down the path of redemption arcs. I mean, there's just so many. I think the Battle of Haven is just such a great example of like, why are we fighting? Oh, I don't know. we just kind of are. The villains don't have this thing that like motivates them and drives their actions. And yeah, I don't necessarily want it to be Adam. I don't necessarily want it to be Cinder. I don't want it necessarily to be Hazel. But goddamn, could you just give me one of them?
Yeah. I mean, I have a whole slide devoted to Adam discourse, so we'll get into that a bit.
Can't wait.
We'll get into that a bit more there. But I kind of see where you're coming from. I think a lot of their motivations do feel kind of weak. And I think especially because of like the battle in Haven being so poorly executed, I think there is potential there for there to be like real emotionality and for us to feel like these characters are really driven to something, but they just miss it at every opportunity this volume.
I do think that's true. Yeah, like I think Hazel is so weak in his motivation, like entirely.
My running joke about Hazel is that he is the dude in SpongeBob where they go to sell chocolate and he just goes,
Chocolate? Did you say chocolate? Chocolate? Chocolate! Chocolate!
except with Ozpin.
Ozpin!
Ozpin!
So correct. That's it.
And that's his whole character. That's all they give him. And
It's so ham-fisted.
and it's like his like, you know, blood feud that's going to like take him down the path of irredeemable evil feels so like
your sister died on a mission and so now you're going to destroy the world? This is like what we're going with?
It feels so disproportionate.
Totally.
But yeah, I think the other main problem that we've talked about a little bit earlier is it's Team Rocket syndrome, right? I think it's one thing if you're going to have like an elaborate plan, right? It's one thing if the heroes have an elaborate plan and then the plan falls apart and they have to improvise. It's one thing if the villains have an elaborate plan that we don't realize is happening until it's already too late, essentially. Like, we get hints at it, but, you know, they don't, like, pull the curtain back. This volume, like, we know exactly what the villains are gonna do, and then it just goes to shit immediately. And it just feels really... It just makes them look incompetent. Like, Cinder has a plan, and it falls apart immediately. Adam has a plan, and it falls apart immediately. Hazel just sucks. Like, there's just... It's like, even the villains that I like in other volumes feel very lame in this volume.
I mean, we're not afraid for Weiss to die because we don't think they're capable of doing that. I mean, that's not good.
It is not good. All right, let's talk about probably the most common complaint about this volume to the point where it was a huge fucking meme on the subreddit. RWBY in the house. I think people calculated that about 1/3 of the screen time in this volume was spent with Team Ranger and company sitting around that house in Haven, just sort of talking about shit and absorbing exposition. Maria, were you particularly struck by this the first time you watched this through and or on the rewatch?
Definitely came across more on the rewatch than the first time. Because honestly, my first viewing of Volume 5 was just kind of a blur because it, like, for me, a lot of the volume just kind of feels like a blur. Yeah, I mean, there are parts that, like, I really like the part where, like, where Oscar shows up and goes, like, I found him. I thought that was funny, but it's just, yeah, sitting around talking, you know, and we know that the attack on Haven is coming at, like, a sometimes unspecified, sometimes specified part in the future, and we're just, like, tick-tock waiting for the day to come.
Yeah, and that sort of, like, I think the pacing in general was an issue in this volume, and the like, RWBY in the house is just a side effect of that, where it's, like, things are happening on, like, different time scales where you can't actually tell when something is occurring relative to when something else is occurring. So it's like...
Yes, for sure.
So it's like, Blake will be doing something in Menagerie, but you can't tell, like, okay, at what point during the Menagerie shit is, like, for example, like, Yang and Weiss, do Yang and Weiss come back to like, reunite with RWBY and company? Or, like when Oscar comes back to, when Crow finds Oscar, like, where is Yang at her point in her story? Like, you don't get a sense, you know these things aren't actually happening simultaneously, but you don't know how they line up. And so when they all come together at the end, it doesn't feel quite as satisfying as it should.
Yep.
Pug, do you have thoughts on this?
Sure. We kind of talked about this last episode about, so not only is it hard to tell how things are happening in the pacing, but the dedicated screen time towards each kind of event that's happening feels really skewed in this. I mean, I know they wanted it all to sync up at a certain point, and maybe they felt shoehorned into doing it in the way that they did, but I just don't think it's successful.
Yeah. Erin, Allie, you were watching this in real time when this came out. Do you remember people, like, making a whole fuss about this?
I do remember, like, the fuss. I also didn't, like, I didn't personally take a lot of issue with the too much sitting around myself, because I don't know. I'm kind of split where we're talking about how like Oscar and Osmond have all these scenes where he's just like info dumping like all this stuff. There's like the bird thing. There's other stuff that they talk about.
The relics.
The relics. Yeah, but the parts that I like actually kind of enjoy in this volume are like in the house where they're like the dinner scene where they're talking to each other, or the training scene where they're like having like cute character moments. I actually like those a lot because I feel like we haven't seen a lot of that since volume 3 at this point. And it's kind of like those scenes, at least to me, are like a throwback to like when things were simpler and like when we could still like kind of treat things a little more casually. And I enjoy those scenes a lot myself, just because it feels like a time when it like slows down. I mean, I like volume 4 a lot because it slows down. This, I think the exposition parts, like there's just too much of it. Like every time Oscar walks into the room and is like, I've got to tell you something. And it's kind of like, oh man. It's like comes in to interrupt like the happy stuff. It kind of is a little frustrating.
It's like Ozpin is like the fucking owl in Ocarina of Time, where every time he shows up, it's like, oh, time for another wall of text. You can hear like the music starting in the background. Yeah, I'm with you on that, Allie. I think, again, part of the reason I liked this volume more the first time I watched it through is because I didn't mind, like, the slower pace, and I wanted to see them take some time to develop these characters out a bit. But it does get a bit excessive. Erin, do you have thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I really agree. Like, I remember it being brought up, but not while it was airing. I feel like I remembered a lot more like basically after it ended and everybody was like, wow, that whole volume was really in a house.
Yeah.
But I also think like I remember that volume being just very sort of preoccupied with like when they were all finally going to reunite. So there was like kind of this building excitement, I think, that entire volume. So like even though they were in this house one time, it was kind of, we were sort of always just like waiting for this, central event where their Team RWBY's finally reunited, like to happen. So I think in that way, it was sort of like not really, it wasn't as noticeable. These things weren't focused on as much because people were just finally like, oh my God, we just went through the hell of volume 4 and now we know this is going to happen. And so I think there's just like a lot more excitement from the community in that way. So that's kind of more usually what I remember when I remember watching these things live, is just like the community, which I guess is like a testament to the show itself and what it's created.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I can see that. There have definitely been points where, like, I remember, like, the whatever was going on in the show was, like, less memorable than just people, like, freaking out about it afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
There were so many moments in Volume 6 where it was like that.
Oh, yeah.
Where, like, there would be some shit I barely even thought about in the show, and then, like, my entire dash would just be the same gif over and over and over again of, like, Blake doing the thing with her hands and shit like that.
Like her ear twitching at gym, that was like on my dashboard for literally ever.
God. But yeah, pacing is rough this volume, and I think
that's a hard time.
That is one of the big things that dragged it down, and I think that the house is sort of a symptom of that. And again, the recurring problem that never quite goes away of they just can't quite get the exposition right. It just never feels natural. A couple other things. All right, it's time. They turn me. I can turn into a bird, RWBY. I can turn into a bird.
I don't get it. That sounds exclusively beneficial.
I know I'm mutuals with Jello Apocalypse. I really hope he watches this just so we can see like 4 people quote his own video back at him. Okay, the Crow and Raven getting bird powers is so fucking stupid. Okay, it's fun because it's like, okay, their names are Crow and Raven and they can turn into a crow and a raven. Sure, like this show, like, can't be fucking subtle to save its life. Why not? And, like, they set it up well in the sense that you can see them flying around as birds in the background of scenes all the time before this. So it's like, it's done well in that sense. But the fact that everyone treats it like it's the end of the world is bizarre to me, and I will never understand it.
I think it's that thing again where it's like, this show has been just really bad at explaining the difference between, like, magic and dust and symbols and all that stuff. So, like, I kind of think back to when they were also shocked to learn that magic is real, blah, blah. And I don't know if there's just this weird, like, fear of magic we're not really getting in the series that characters have, or, like, there's just something there that they absolutely do not get across well as to why them being birds is, like, horrific, Like, I mean, Raven especially, like, she's like, this fucking sucks. And I'm like, bitch, you're a bird in, like, every scene. Like,
yes!
What do you mean? Like...
She gets so much utility out of being a bird.
She does.
I think what it always reminds me of is the scene in Madoka Magica where Madoka grabs Sayaka's soul gem and throws it onto the truck. And they spend, like, the next, 10 minutes of Madoka just being like, how horrible! Oh, I can't believe you've separated our souls from our bodies. I was like, no, this is exclusively positive. Like, I'm actually, like, I am with Kyubey in every, I want to kill Kyubey for 90% of the show, but he actually has a point here. Like, this feels like the one time where it's like, really, Ozpin has done so much shady shit, and you pick the one, like, good example of something he's done as a way to show that, like, he's keeping secrets from people. It's just, oh, God.
Maybe this could just be Ozpin, like, defending himself or whatever, but I'm pretty sure they established that Crow and Raven opted into this.
Yeah.
Like, they chose this. It wasn't just something that Ozpin did to them. Like, if they didn't want it, they could have said no.
And I mean, now, like, I also wonder if they were trying to do something about, like, Ozpin, like, grooming them in a way. Because I guess they were teenagers, right, when this was happening?
I think there's...
Raven, like, talks about that a little bit, where she's like, he started paying us special attention and blah, 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 blah. So if that was their goal, I also don't think they executed that really well. I think it would take a lot to actually pick up on that specifically, what Raven's problem is. I mean, it's not, like, out of the question. Like, obviously, Ozpin also groomed Team RWBY. But I think it's, like, it's hard to connect that now, if that was even the point, but who knows?
I think you're right in that what they're trying to communicate is that he, like, picks... Yeah, because they basically established this, and they actually go even deeper into this, because Mercedes was telling me in the books, they talk about how he treated Team Coffee the same way, where every, like, new class of students, he picks one team that he thinks has, like, a lot of potential and sort of... focuses in on them and lets them sort of cheat around the rules and gives them special attention. And I think it'd be interesting if they, like, followed up more on that. I don't know. I think we get the sense that this is, like, a real thing with him, where, like, the thing they're trying to communicate with Ozpin is that he's sort of, like, going around people's backs and doing, like, shady shit. And, like, there are a million examples they could have used, and they picked, like, the one thing that feels, again, exclusively beneficial. Like, I get what they're trying to do, they just communicate it horribly.
Yeah, totally.
Another issue with this volume, fucking Sienna Khan, the most wasted character in the whole show, possibly. She's so great, and she shows up and dies immediately, and it is infuriating.
That's true, we only get her in that character short.
Pug, I feel like you were, like, particularly salty about Sienna.
Yeah, I think she's the only cat girl I've ever been attracted to, and she dies after 4 seconds of screen time. It's horrible. I also think, kind of following the thread of me being angry about how the White Fang is done in the series, showing someone who is a little more complicated than Blake's family, a little more valid than Adam, and then giving them absolutely no time to speak is very frustrating to me.
Yes. I think that is my core issue with how they handled Sienna, aside from, again, just, like, killing her off immediately, is that, like, she feels like the sort of, like, I guess, happy median here, or, like, a more interesting perspective on the White Fang, where it's like, there is some validity to, like, using violence and, like, using force and, like, getting results that way in a way that isn't fucking Adam, where he's just being a dick for its own sake, basically. Like, that's an option, but they basically, like, dangle it in front of you and, like, oh yeah, this exists, and then immediately just throw it out the window. And again, I think we'll discuss this in the Adam discourse slide, because this really ties into, like, problems of how they handle him and his character. And I think Sienna sort of getting tossed out the window like that is just sort of a side effect of how they deal with Adam. Professor Lionheart sucks, and he's boring, and he's not fun to watch on screen.
True.
Yeah, especially compared to like Ironwood, Lionheart is so like just underdeveloped and like not interesting in any way that he just comes and goes. I'm kind of glad he's just gone at this point because I feel like they just had him serve a purpose and then he's gone, which is like sucks because it's lost potential. But yes,
it really makes me worried for what they're gonna do to that for the headmaster of Vacuo. Like, which is he gonna be interesting like Ironwood, or is he just gonna be bleh, like Lionheart?
I hear. Actually, wait, I'll have to ask Mercedes about that because she's actually read the books, and I think they mention the headmaster in Shade in those.
I'm kind of wondering if they're just going to be like a buffoon, because the Scarecrow is like the one without a brain, right? So I'm just wondering if he's going to be like, how did I get here to this position of power? Oh, well, it's fun. And that would actually be like probably a good choice for a character if they're not going to be like as deep as Ironwood is, because those characters are better as like supporting cast members.
Yeah.
The scene where Raven like kind of really relates to Lionheart just comes off as so strange to me. Like, oh, you did what you had to. Like, did he really though?
No.
Yeah, but that whole scene, she's like trying to convince herself, like not even him. It's like about, you know.
I think the problem with Lionheart fundamentally is that his one character trait is that he's a coward, and as we learned from volumes 1 and 2 of Jean, having a character who's just, oh, I'm peeing and pooping my pants is just really frustrating and unsatisfying, even when they're an antagonist, and possibly even more so, because it just makes them feel like a complete, like, non-presence.
Like all the other antagonists.
As a final nitpick, when they show up in Mistral and they do like some like establishing shots, those are all in 2D and they look really out of place.
Yeah.
That's just something that was bugging me when I watched it this time around. I don't know.
I felt bad because RWBY's like, wow, we're at Mistral, and then it's like all these 2D shots, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's the contrast of the reaction, and then they show like the cheapest shots in the whole volume. All right,
This just goes to show how like not well developed Mistral is.
Yes. Oh my god. Okay, Discourse, it's a little different this volume. I remember when I was watching, 5 was like the first volume that I watched, not like entirely live, but I caught up with 5 and watched the last couple episodes as they came out. I actually bought my Verve subscription specifically to watch the last episode as it aired. But like, I remember getting to see like the Discourse around the time, and from what I recall, most of it was basically just people arguing about if the show is any good. Which we've already covered extensively. So instead, I just took, like, 3 characters that there seemed to be a lot of disagreement on the planning doc as to if their arcs were done well or not, and just gave them slides, and we'll just sort of hash it out, get into it, and see how we feel about these characters. First up, we have Yang. Yang, on the planning doc, there is a bullet point that Erin added in. Let me make sure I get this right. One sec.
He's pulling up the receipts.
Is it my Yang is a dyke
that just
point? This is Yang's gayest volume?
Yes, it says, this, in all caps, this is Yang's gayest volume thus far. Let's discuss.
Yes.
Let's discuss, Erin. What are give me your thoughts on Yang this volume.
Okay, my thoughts are that I actually genuinely think that this is the volume that they were like, we are going to go all in on Dyke Yang, which I respect them for that, obviously. But like the whole scene at the beginning where she's like in that gas station and that the bandit tries to like basically hit on her,
God.
and she like, you could not have seen a gayer woman in that moment than her being like, I will literally kill you if you even touch me. That entire scene is excellent.
That was so satisfying to just watch him get knocked the fuck out.
She literally, like, destroyed that man. Like, it was incredible. But just, you know, everything about her. Look at her outfit. Like, her boots. Look at the the aviators are back again. Like, her whole attitude. She's like, I am not here for any of you bitches. Like, let's go.
I think Yang this volume gives off like some like Clint Eastwood like Western energy to me.
Yes.
She's just like wandering through this like sparsely populated countryside, like kicking ass and taking names,
Exactly. It's incredible. It's incredible.
And that's just like yeah.
And also obviously like then she's gay for Blake later. It's just like she's just like real gay this volume.
Yeah. And, like, that's, like, a character type where I feel like it can get boring if you drag it out too much, where if they, like, never break that persona and they're just, like, always a badass. But getting, like, a little bit of it here and there, so much fun.
Yeah, especially after her in 4, where she's just, like, fucking traumatized.
Exactly.
Like, it's incredibly satisfying to see her, like, come back into herself this way. I, like, loved it.
That is like a big part of it for me, is seeing the comeback of her being back on her feet and, sort of like she's not at 100% yet. And you even see that like the way that like her hand shakes after she hits someone, where like she's not quite back to the same like level of sort of vivaciousness that she was at in 1 and 2. And again, in the way she carries herself, where instead of it being her presence being, again, very fun and bubbly, it's a lot more sort of stoic and with this sort of like simmering rage beneath it at all times. But again, it feels very natural coming off of volume 4. And yeah, I just love what they do with her this volume.
Me too. I'm so with you.
Another thing I really love about Yang in this volume is the scene where she tells Raven to fuck off in the vault at the very end. This is something that I wish I had brought up in the Volume 4 episode, but I can bring it up now, which is great. There's that scene where she's training with Ty in Volume 4, where Ty is sort of comparing and contrasting the two, and they're like, you both care a lot about strength, but, Raven just sort of, like, puts strength above everything. We have to get into that in the Raven slide. But there's this part where he's like, Raven feels like the only way to get past an obstacle is to go directly through it, but sometimes you can just there's another path, you can go past it, and there's that part where he, like, stands in front of his Y and then walks around him, and I realize that's, like, a clear parallel to the way that Yang confronts Raven at the end, where she doesn't have to fight her, she just, like, basically turns her own logic against her. It's like, why would you want the relic if it's just gonna paint a target on your back? Like, you're afraid of making yourself like vulnerable in that way, but I'm not. And so the idea of like being strong by not just like plowing ahead and like not caring about like the people close to you and just doing what's best for you, but being strong instead by doing the opposite, which is taking on this burden and putting yourself at risk in the interest of like protecting those around you, is just so thematically satisfying. And seeing her literally just walk right past Raven into the vault in that same way, it's like the parallels are there, the character beats are there. I think this really is like a lot of why I was so positive on Volume 5 the first time I watched it through, is because I was sort of like zeroing in on Yang's arc, and it's like, it is,
I 100% agree.
And it's like the juiciest part of the volume, and it's the one that like hits the most consistently for me.
Yeah, and I think even you were just talking about like how she, that conversation with Ty, and like actually that's another thing I think they do really well. It's like they actually show that Yang like took all of that to heart. Like she is literally smarter this volume, and how she fights and how she is perceiving things in the world. Like I love the fight with the bandits, because I love at the end when she goes to do that move, and it's the exact same move, the same punch that she does to Adam that lost her arm. And instead of following through with it, she like punches the ground and goes over him and punches him from behind. And it's like those little moments that like that, where it's like she has already grown so much and learned so much from what she has experienced, and now we get to see that actually come to fruition. It's so good.
All right, I think we have said our piece. There's no shortage of, I don't want to say Yang haters, but people who aren't as positive on this whole series of events. Allie, how do you feel about Yang this volume?
Yeah, I'm again, like season 4, I'm like frustrated with it. I'm not a fan of like, well, so I'll preface this with like, I think Yang in the early volumes is her characterization is kind of messy, but she is like a very like upbeat and like compassionate person for a lot of it. She takes things very like carefree and like very like not like rose tinted or anything, but she sees like the world very like as like kind of her like space to roam, you know? It's like her
a sandbox.
She's the she feels like the protagonist. And then like she feels very like happy, but then like the way they like kind of take her character and make her very not like one note, because I feel like she's very black and white, where she's either really angry really suddenly, or she's just like so disinterested in everything else. And I don't like that, because it feels like they're like taking out like a lot of who she was in the beginning. And I feel like that's just doesn't feel like a very natural progression, because she's gone through a lot of really horrible stuff. But she shouldn't like completely like lose who she is also, even though like the events that happened to her changed her a lot. And I feel like they just change her so drastically. To me it feels very like girl boss, and I don't appreciate how
Oh, no.
she's very like I'm a cool girl. I don't know, to me it just, the way she's written in this volume feels very like a dude writing a cool girl. Like I just don't think I don't know. It just does not read very like satisfying to me as like a personal character's development. I do agree everything you said about like the end scene with Raven, where she is smart and she tells Raven like you don't know what you're talking about and I'm right. I think that is like very well done, but I still just don't like that for this volume, majority of it, the only exceptions I see is when like there is like the dinner scene where they're all eating dinner. Other than that, she is always like really angry and just like at the like the drop of a hat she gets pissed really fast, or she's just really like flat and like just like whatever, I don't care. And I think part of it is to do with her voice acting. Like I don't really think, I think Barb is probably the weakest out of the four main characters, and I think here it kind of shows where like even when she's angry, to me it doesn't feel like she's exploding in anger. It feels like she's like whatever, mom. It's like very like anime anger, where she's kind of like restrained anger. But then like when she's just interested, there's no like, to me there's no like underlying like she's trying to hold herself back from being angry, or there's no like deeper emotion than her just being like a cool girl. I don't know. It's just, I'm very conflicted with Yang, because I really like actually what they do with her in season 6. Because like that's when she gets to like hash things out with Blake. But right now when she's kind of on her own, and like especially her in their scenes with Raven, like before the final scene, I think it's just very frustrating to watch Yang on screen.
Maria, what kind of impression did you get? Because I feel like you're not super into Yang this volume either.
Yeah, I was just kind of meh on her the whole volume. I liked the kind of stoic badass thing in the beginning. Yeah, she's just kind of flat for me this volume.
Pug, I actually don't know how you feel about her right now.
This is such a cop-out. I see points in both camps. I'm a little neutral. I really love her interactions with Raven in particular. I really love her interactions with Weiss, discovering a new side of myself. But there are some things that feel a little ham-fisted about it. This, the thread of abandonment and the thread of kind of this new stoic side of her. But then there are some moments that are just so good and crunchy, like her kind of waffling back and forth about if she can forgive Blake. So I'm surprised there's so much discourse around this, since I feel so neutrally.
I think like, at the time, there was a lot of, I do remember there being discourse around this, but at the time I remember it being kind of very separated on if you thought Yang was in love with Blake or if you didn't. And like the way I view Yang this volume is she's deeply traumatized, not just from losing her arm and like the events of that night, but also because Blake like left her, like right after this horrible thing happened, like she ran away. And So Yang, this volume is like not the anger is just like I mean, how I see it is like just kind of a cover for grief, basically. Is like she doesn't know how to be hurt because she has never actually been hurt, like outwardly too. She's not good at being vulnerable. And we don't actually see that a ton from her throughout the series. Like she is that kind of caretaker. She takes care of RWBY. She takes care of her team. Like she isn't the one who's gonna sit there and be like, I need help. Like that's just not who she is. And so I think what we're seeing this volume is Yang being deeply, deeply hurt and having no idea how to talk about it. And so instead of being able to talk about it, she's just angry.
Yeah.
And like we see that in her conversation with Raven in the tent, where like even the smallest things set her up. Like it's kind of like I like all these conversations because they're so coded. It's like asking why Raven left, but also in a way you get that she's asking why, like she wants to know why Blake left. Like she's just damaged, like honestly, and she doesn't have Blake there to sort of figure to sort of answer her questions. Like she doesn't know what happened. She doesn't know why she left. She's just sitting here with all of these feelings and like nowhere to put them. And the first time we actually see them come out is in that conversation with Weiss, which is why I think that conversation is so powerful. Because finally she's admitting, like, I needed her. Like I needed someone else and I have never said that. And like that person I need is not here. And so I think when you kind of view Yang, this volume through that lens, her actions and how everything she says and what she does, like it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, did you guys split two bumblebees, two non-bumblebees? Is that what just happened?
That pretty much is what happened.
Yes, that is literally what just happened.
So in this small sample size, we've proved your point.
We can prove.
Oh yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, like from the perspective of like, I mean, if I lost my goth cat girl GF, I'd be pretty pissed too. But
exactly.
Like, yeah, but even like looking beyond that, just the idea of like losing her arm, losing her team, her sister running off basically with no notice, which is like the other thing sort of keeping her grounded. I like, to me, it feels very natural for her to progress from sort of despair and hopelessness in volume 4 and just not being able to see any way forward to, okay, now I have a way forward, and now she's like on a fucking mission, she is laser focused, and it's like, she had that side. I kind of get what you're saying, Allie, about like there was a side of her that was more fun and lighthearted that is lost this volume, but I think that's with a purpose. I think there's a reason for that, and the reason is that she is sort of not in the right mindset for that. She's recovering from, like, yeah, it's like Erin said, she's recovering from trauma, and now it's just like, I'm just trying to get shit done. Like, I'm gonna find my mom, I'm gonna, like, figure out what the fuck is up with her, get some answers, and then go find my sister and keep her safe. And so, yeah, I think it's fine to have a character who is like, the fun, jokey one, and like, especially with like everything Yang's went through, I think it makes total sense for her to like change tone a bit, at least for this volume.
And I actually think, Allie, like I actually would have totally agreed with you if they had kept her this way past this volume.
Yeah,
but I think because we see her kind of like
Six, they do a really good job getting her out of this zone, I think. Yeah. So
I think if they had not done that, then I would be totally in your camp, and I'd be like, no, you're right. Like they kind of lost a part of her. But I think because they bring it back after sort of you see her like personal relationships get a little more like resolved. So that's why I'm more like, I think that this is a good kind of, I guess, emotional filler volume in that way.
Yeah. I'll say one last thing, I guess, that like I think like the idea of where her whole issue, I think, for like 4 and 5 is the issue of abandonment. My issue is that I feel like they're adding it like retroactively, where like they didn't establish it well enough in the early volumes, in my opinion, that like her like feelings of abandonment were obviously there because she brings it up in Burning the Candle like a little bit.
Right.
But other than that, I feel like it's not something that is there in the early volumes. And then in 4, they never, I think, really establish like what the problem is, because we were talking last episode about how like it's kind of related to her strength and her like her shocking realization she's not strong. But then in this volume, they're kind of saying that it's because of her feelings of abandonment that she had as a child, experience it with her mom, and then experiencing it again with Blake. And my issue is that I feel like they're adding it and like saying that no, that was the problem all along back in those later volumes. And I think that is kind of like a weak part of it, where I just wish that earlier on they had decided what was going to happen with Yang, and now they're trying to add it, and it just feels a little bit fast and like sloppy, and like, whoa, that was the problem all along. I didn't like necessarily realize it until this moment when she had to say it out loud, and just say like everything all at once. Like the whole speech where she's talking about how like comparing herself to Weiss, where she's like, yeah, I never had like a family, and I never had I had to be the one like in charge to take care of people all the time. I feel like I never saw that in like early volumes, and now that she's telling it to me, I kind of just has to accept that that's what happened. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of frustrating.
I think it's like and this is not even like a cop out. I think it's totally a shipping thing, because like that was like one of the biggest Bumblebee things. Is always we were like, oh my god, the girl who always runs, and then the girl who's always left behind. So it's like that has always been so top of mind for us. Like that has just been such a huge thing. So that's I guess that's also different. Like I never actually thought of that, but I guess it makes sense that we're like so hyper focused on, you know, every single thing and every interaction these two characters have, of course. But yeah, that has always been like a super like a forefront idea for like just the characters in the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Bumblebee brain rot, man. It does
it's
things.
So true.
It does things to you. Head empty, only bees buzzing.
Yeah, you're like, oh, volume 2, I only know burning the candle. What's up?
Yeah, I think Allie, I definitely agree with you on some of that. Like, again, like her arc does really work for me here, but I think you're right in that one of my complaints early on is that Yang gets so little in the first few volumes, and because of that, they sort of have to cram all of the setup for the payoffs in this volume into 4. And because of that, unlike with Blake, where they knew what they were doing with her from the beginning, and it feels very natural and very satisfying when she comes back around in the end, with Yang, it does feel a bit more like they had to sort of shoehorn it in. It feels rushed in a certain way. Like they figured out her arc, but it took them too long, and so a lot of the setup that could have been done earlier and a lot of like her conflicts that they could have established in the first couple volumes, it all has to be done at like the end of 3 and in 4. And yeah, I think there's something to be said for like, this could have been executed better, but I don't know. Sometimes you just want like a blonde girl in aviators to step on you. I got nothing.
You're so correct.
I got nothing beyond that.
I think I just wanted to say one last thing, because I think fandom is like so powerful, and I think what Bumblebee did with like giving Yang like a more defined character trait like that, I think is really important, because you can see what like I think the writers wanted to do but just didn't have the time to do in the story, or they just didn't know how to execute it. I think that's really important to just at least realize, because I'm sure like that is what they wanted to do for a long time, and they just like now unfortunately they had to like in the actual show they had to cram it in.
Yeah. Well, if you want like a full, complete, satisfying arc, you can always go to fanfiction for that.
Yes.
All right. Related to Yang, let's talk a bit about Raven, because I feel like opinion is again very split on this. Let's start on the negative side this time. Allie, you are once again in the contrarian corner.
I think we're all of these characters. Oh man. Yeah, so my issue with Raven, we were talking about villains in general earlier. I think Raven is a good example of like they're trying to do a morally gray character, but also like a very classically, like, I guess not nihilistic, but like just evil character at the same time, where Raven's actions I feel like are very like, I just in this for myself and I don't care about anyone else. It's all about me. But then like at the same time, I feel like she's just like so like the fear that she has is so like obvious, and she's like fronting so much that it just is like a little like, wow, you are like really scared and it's so obvious, and the fact that you're just trying to put on this mask the whole time for me is like very off-putting, because it just feels like a weak like she feels like makes her feel weak as a villain to me because she's not like 100% sure of her actions. I think what makes like a good villain that are like very classically evil, like the original Maleficent or like those very like old like Walt Disney villains, they just like do what they want and they're like, yeah, I'm right and I'm not afraid. I'm doing what I think is the right thing for me and no one else matters to me at all. And the problem with Raven is that it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're trying to make her a more like dimensional character, but the fact that like she's fronting as like this like I'm not scared and then like she totally is scared just feels like she feels not powerful to me, which I think is not good as a villain.
Pug, I feel like this ties into your broader thesis about villains in RWBY. Do you have similar feelings?
I have genuinely the opposite feeling.
Oh.
I'm gonna slide my little permit across the table. It says villain fucker PhD,
Ah.
and then I'm gonna say that I don't think Raven is a villain.
I agree.
I think I actually like Raven as a character. I have this. This is gonna be such an unpopular opinion, and I've been percolating on it for like a week, rewatching it.
We're 2 hours in. Just say it.
Is a little harsh when they say that she abandoned Yang. Leaving Yang with her loving father that was extremely capable of raising a child while Raven ran off to like live in the woods with bandits, I actually think is a smart decision from Raven's point of view. My evidence of this is we see what happens to Renaud. We see what happens to young women that hang around Raven, and I think wanting that for her daughter doesn't necessarily make her this like evil person that everyone paints her to be. That's just my personal humble onion. Having an absent mom from your life isn't actually the worst thing. I think having a mom that would be harmful to your development could be a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
But I like Raven. I actually like that she's afraid. I like this weird kind of outside perspective of, I don't think we can beat Salem, but I'm going to try to do my best for the people that are around me. I just like it, Raven and Crow kind of as foils in that way. But yeah, I feel for Yang. I just think Yang's problem isn't that she was abandoned. It's just that she kind of is wistful for a mother she doesn't have. I don't think Raven was ever going to be capable of fulfilling Yang's expectations in that way.
Super interesting. I've never thought about that, but that's like a very good point.
Yeah, I think like Raven would have been like the quote-unquote world's greatest mom even if she did stick around. There is something to be said for that. I mean, there's like her relationship with Yang really is that fucking art that people keep drawing of her at the beach holding a baby Yang upside down by her leg. Like,
yeah,
that's just how she operates. And yeah, I think part of why the reason why she ran is because like she didn't want to, she'd have to be a completely different kind of person to be a good mother. And she just either was too afraid to do that or didn't think she was capable of doing that. Whatever. It's sort of the same difference, like 6-1. Maria, did you have like strong impressions of Raven first time through?
Don't really know how to feel about her, honestly. I think she's a little... I never really saw her... I wasn't sure like whether or not I should see her as a villain or not. I still kind of don't, but like I don't really think she's that great of a person. I think she's kind of confusing with her actions. Also, I'm not very confident that we're going to see a lot more of her as the series goes on. I think it's pretty like I think they're probably going to yeet her from the future volumes, so I'm just kind of like, I don't really feel strongly about her just because I don't really think I need to going forward, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you on that point, but I also don't think that's necessarily a problem, since I feel like they kind of like resolved her this volume, so to speak. Like, she had, like, we knew what she was about. She had, like, some important character beats, and now she can just kind of fuck off and do her own thing. And that sort of makes sense for her and for everyone else. Because that is sort of her whole character, is just fucking off and doing her own thing.
True.
Erin, what are your thoughts on Raven?
Honestly, like I actually love Raven, and I don't think she's a villain at all. I think I almost know it's like I actually don't think she's just self-absorbed. Like, she cares deeply about her tribe. Like, her tribe is really like her family, and it's in a way that like Yang is not, which is really interesting. I think it gives her like a complexity. So yeah, like I can't say anything else that hasn't really been said except for that. Like, I just like really like her as a character, and super excited for, hopeful Raven's death and future Spring Maiden Yang.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, Allie, about what you said about Raven comes off as like a poser because she tries so hard to be like strong and intimidating and threatening, but at the same time she is like very obviously afraid of Salem, and her insecurities are kind of out there. Like, for all the reasons you don't like her are kind of the reasons I do like her, because I just think that makes her an interesting, complicated character.
Yeah.
She's sort of a neutral force in the story where you never know exactly what direction she's going to turn. She's sort of Shadow the Hedgehog like in that manner.
Yes.
Fitting for her color scheme. Nothing personnel, kid. Yeah, I think she adds like an interesting dimension to the show where, I mean, we talked about this earlier, how RWBY is very black and white sometimes with its characters, where the heroes are just like very, very good and the villains are very, very bad, and there isn't a whole lot of space in between, and Raven is one of the people who is in that space in between, where because she's operating purely from a position of, like you said, Erin, not entirely self-interest, because it's like her and her tribe, but from a position of like, I don't really care about this broader conflict, I just need to keep, me and my own safe. I think that makes for like some very interesting interactions, and especially in terms of like how she furthers Yang's development, how she contrasts with Crow. I also like that, again, as frustrating as the whole I can turn into a bird RWBY bit was, I think like retroactively Raven was absolutely on the money in that Ozpin is hiding shit from them and he's not the man they think he is. And so from that, it's like, damn, she's actually making some points here. So yeah, I think she adds a lot to the story. And yeah, I like her a lot. And also, she's just like cool looking. I mean, like, all the characters in RWBY are cool looking, but I feel like her especially, for whatever reason, I just love her design.
Oh, so like, I think this is probably affecting me. It sounds like maybe more than the rest of the people here right now, but like, one of the reasons I think I was like, I guess, let down by Raven's character is that the first time you see her in volume 2, so RWBY has an issue with show and tell is a very much an understatement. But like, that was one of the examples, like the rare examples where it was like showing you so much, where like Raven appears out of nowhere. She unsheaths her sword, doesn't even like attack really, and Neo just like runs away. And that to me was like a show of like unmatched strength, like to the likes we haven't seen before at all.
Right.
And then to see her presented like when she actually is, kind of like contrasting that so much, is, I think for me, I think I was a little like disappointed. Because that to me was like seeing someone that like you don't know anything about them except that they're just so incredibly powerful, and then to have her kind of not be that was a little disappointing.
I mean, she still is extremely powerful. I mean, she kicks Cinder's ass, and based on like the premise of the Maiden powers.
Yeah, that doesn't mean much.
No,
I'm sorry. It was one of those things where like when I saw someone like Raven as like just first introduced, so you didn't know who she was, I was like, she's like the most powerful person in the show, is what I just assumed, because if someone like Neo, who just beat Yang up really badly on the train, is running away from her like without even trying, it means that she's like extremely powerful. But
I
then
think a
like
lot of it is like reputation though too. Like Cinder says to her when she's like, you know, you were the whatever she says about her being a fearless leader or some shit. I don't remember the exact words. But like I think Raven just clearly has like a terrifying reputation, and maybe like that is enough.
That is like a core part of her character, is the idea of projecting strength more so than anything.
That's true. Yeah, that's definitely true.
It's all about projecting the image of strength to mask her fears. It's like a weirdly macho way of thinking for like a mom character, which I find really interesting.
There's also a line from Oscar, or Ozpin, I suppose, when he says that like there's no shame in abstaining, and yet Crow and Ozpin have so much ire for Raven when it comes to abstaining. Like this betrayal, even though he says he's okay with it conceptually. And I really just kind of like how that colors the field and how that colors how we see Ozpin.
I think it's also that she like took a maiden and therefore is no longer actually abstaining, even though she acts like she is.
Yeah, that's part of the inconsistent action for me, where she's like, I want to be not in this situation at all, but then she will like harbor like a maiden with her and then say she's not involved in any way.
But I think she did that for her own power, you know, like to, again, like protecting her own people. Like if she has this power, who can fuck with her? Really, it's like nobody.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things where I saw is like she kept it a secret, and like to Yang's credit, apparently Yang is also not shared that secret. So it's like Raven is really just out there with this immense power now, protecting her people and doing whatever the hell she's doing, and like is mostly left alone.
Mostly. All right, let's close this out. This podcast has been running for a long time already. It's time for
Adam.
Adam, I think, has some of the worst discourse around him of any character in this fucking show by like a country mile. Adam, like, trying to discuss this character on the internet is a nightmare, and I have high hopes for our ability to make it not that. My overall take on Adam is that I feel like if you're writing a villain, right, there's sort of three approaches you can take if you want to make a really satisfying villain. Your first option is you make someone who's like really morally complicated and potentially redeemable. Someone where even if they don't end up getting any kind of redemption, if they just lose outright in the end, you're still sort of left wondering like, they kind of had a point there, like, was the hero like really in the right here? And that just sort of like makes them interesting and gives you something to chew on. You can have a villain who isn't in any way like redeemable or relatable, but they're just like a ton of fun to watch. Maybe they have like really good banter with the hero. Maybe they're just really like campy and over the top. Maybe they have a cool fighting style. They just give you like a lot of, you want to see them on screen, even if you never want them to win. And then you have fuckers who just have punchable faces and you just want to see them get stomped into the ground. And I think the fundamental issue with Adam is that people thought he would be category 1 or category 2, and he is absolutely category 3. And I think that has defined like a lot of the problems with him. I think he exists to suck ass, and he does that, and he furthers of like Blake and Yang's character development by being the shithead he is. And in that way, I think he works very well as a villain. But I know not everyone agrees on this.
I do agree, so yeah.
Yeah. Pug, as the resident villain expert, I guess. The villain connoisseur.
Yeah, some might say.
What's your take on this dude?
So I'm going to start by saying that I am in no way nostalgic for the Adam that exists, and I am wistful for an Adam that does not exist. I hear you. I hear everyone on the internet who's like, this is a character that has done terrible things to a character I love, and I would not like him to be valid at all. I absolutely hear you. I'm also tired of discourse. I totally get it. The problem for me is that everyone always is like, oh, he's charismatic. Oh, he's a great leader. I never have seen that. I worry that the Adam that lives rent-free in everyone's mind is potentially a fanon version of Adam that does not actually exist. I think I would be okay with him being this boring one-note villain that doesn't seem to be good at anything and is entirely unthreatening if he was not also intrinsically linked to the White Fang and kind of representative of this kind of minority group that has had violence against them and is trying to like reclaim rights and reclaim space in the world. It's hard for me to swallow how fucking awful this character is and that intrinsic link at the same time. But I dislike Adam as he exists now, and I am in no way apologizing for his actions.
Allie?
Yeah, so I remember this has been on a podcast or like some kind of RWBY thing, or I remember like Miles and Carrie said they hate writing Adam, and I can feel it. Like, I feel how much they hate writing Adam because I feel like they did a bad job at it. And it's one of those situations where, like, I totally agree with you, Pug, where I don't think he is like a good person, and I don't think he needs to be someone that is like redeemable in any way, but he needs to be like written well still. Like, he needs to have dialogue that doesn't make me cringe every time he says anything. And it's kind of like, I'm sorry, like, Miles and Carrie, that you don't like to write this character, but that doesn't mean you do a bad job at it. Like, you have to, like, still make him, if he's gonna be charismatic, he has to, like, exude that. Like, he can't be like, hey, my darling, and, like, Mr. Fedora Tipper incel. Like, he has to be, like, someone that can, like, motivate people. Like, it's so weird when I watch, like, that's the scene where Blake is, like, confronting him when she's on top of the roof and Adam's there, like, about to let the bombs off. And Adam's like, everybody stop so I can talk to my ex. And it's kind of like, who the heck would follow someone like that? Like, why would everyone be like, yeah, let's stop so Adam can, like, talk to his ex-girlfriend for a little bit, guys, in the middle of, like, this... we're in the middle of, like, this important mission that we're on. Like, it's just...
Why the fuck did they follow him for so long with this?
That's the problem, because Ilia has this line that's like, oh, well, now no one will follow him. And I'm like, Ilia, I love you, and you're a perfect baby angel, and you've done nothing wrong in your life. But he's acting the same way he did every volume. What do you mean they won't follow him now?
I actually agree with a lot of what you're saying here, in the sense that it's not that I wish Adam was more valid. I wish that the things about Adam that, for example, Blake saw in him before she realized he was a monster were more apparent.
Yes.
I wish it was easier to see why people followed him in the first place. If he was more sort of cool and confident, and he gave off some of that charisma, like, I mean, obviously there is, like, a certain percentage of the fandom that's really attached to him, but really that's just fucking bitches love EI Jutsu. There's nothing...
And he doesn't even fight like that anymore. He just, like... and it's like, what? He's nothing now.
Yeah. And
literally nothing.
And I think that is, like, the fundamental flaw with how Adam is written, is it's not that he had quote-unquote wasted potential in that he could have been, like, interesting or morally complicated. It's that they never made him... They never gave him the side of him that people did find compelling in universe, so that we can later see, like, the spite and the hatred that's, like, barely contained underneath that. And because of that, scenes like the battle at Haven, where he just, you know, is, you know, shitting out his doo-doo ass and looking like an idiot, don't feel like this big... It feels unsatisfying, because you're not, like, it doesn't feel like you're defeating this big unstoppable force. He comes across as very lame and insecure up to this point, and he feels lame and insecure in that moment. And he is non-threatening for a large percentage of RWBY, And I think he would have been, like, I do think he serves his purpose well to develop other characters, by which I mean Blake and Yang, but it could have been even better if he felt like more of a tangible threat, and if, like, what his power was to begin with, which was his power over other people, was better communicated.
I think what makes, like, a compelling villain in, like, cases like this where they're, like, a leader or figurehead is they don't put their own, like, personal goals before, like, the goals of, like, the group or, like, people that they're, like, representing. And the problem is that's, like, all Adam does, is he's, like, he has that whole speech where he's like, the Belladonnas are, like, ruining my life, we gotta stop them. And it's totally, like, a personal petty thing. And it's something like that where it's, like, people are just, like, helping him with his, like, personal goals and not with, like, the goals of the White Fang, really. And it's just, like, so obvious to, like, the viewer that, like, he's, like, throwing a tantrum when he's, like, on that, like, hologram call with the two White Fang guys. And it's just, like, they're like, yes, let's do what this guy says.
Yeah.
I even like characters that throw tantrums.
Yeah.
I like petty characters that don't put the group ahead of themselves. And I just think Adam is so... It's like, going back to this unreliable narrator thing, it's like the Adam that exists in all these characters' minds is not the Adam I see on screen. And then that makes all of these interactions just so fucking unsatisfying. I mean, I bought chips to watch that scene. I specifically... excitedly bought chips to watch that scene that happens in the later volume, and I was so like, this isn't even fun for me. This very punchable face getting punched isn't even fun for me because he's so bleh. I don't know.
Okay, so I'm gonna disagree with everybody, of course.
Excellent.
I like Adam as a villain because first I'll say this. I don't think we actually need to see him being charismatic or blah, blah, whatever. Like, I think him having a strong personality and being very loud is frankly enough. I mean, no offense, but like, look at our country right now. It's not hard to imagine that Adam can be very loud about one thing and very strong-willed, and people will find that compelling. And that is always what I thought of Adam. I never particularly thought he had some gift for something that people were like, oh, that we were going to see, and it was going to explain him. I thought he was just, like, stronger and louder than everyone else. And I always found him interesting because obviously there was never any Adam that had all of these qualities and was insanely powerful. Like, that Adam is not actually real. We were always seeing Adam through Blake's perspective, and Blake is extremely traumatized by him. I mean, even before he literally, like, stabbed her in the stomach at the Fall of Beacon, like, she was clearly terrified of Adam. And so I think when we came to know Adam through Blake, that is the version that everybody kind of believed, is that Adam was this force to be reckoned with. And again, we saw that, like, with Yang, that Yang, you know, experiencing extreme emotion at seeing Blake, who is already traumatized and thus could not particularly fight back, goes for a really obvious move and gets punished for it. So, like, there was actually never a point where Adam was as strong as we thought he was. And I like that a lot because it's more, I think, more compelling to me that we are just seeing, like, how unreliable they've been. And that in actuality, like in this volume, when Blake goes to face him and she has this army behind her and Adam is obviously unhinged, like, he does not stand a chance. Like, he charges at her again, you know, like, I get the bull thing or whatever. He charges at her and she easily sidesteps him because, like, she is at a place where she is not being, like, haunted in that moment by the things that he has done to her. And I just, like, love the contrast of that we are actually seeing, like, this is the real Adam. Like, he's not clever and he's not powerful. He was abusive and manipulative. And now that Blake has managed to recover somewhat from that, we can actually see him for, like, the coward that he is and, like, the bitch that he is, honestly. Like, he was just never any of those things. And I love that RWBY went there and said that. And they were like, you know what? This Adam has never been real.
I just don't know that it really is making that point. I think removing him from power from the White Fang, maybe I would be able to buy that a little more easily. But I think, yeah, I don't know that it's so consciously making that decision.
Yeah, I think for me, because there are so many people in the show that still follow him that aren't Blake, there's still, like, obviously people that aren't in Blake's perspective that are, like, think he's charismatic is the issue, I think.
Do you mean in the show or like in the fandom?
In the show.
I mean, he has followers, like.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily think that has to mean that he is charismatic in that way.
Leader.
I think.
I mean, all these characteristics that Blake attributes to him, he has those things that pay off. Like he did rise to become the leader of the White Fang. He does have these followers. So like saying he doesn't have those characteristics, but then showing me the results is just not.
I mean, I think he was just willing to do things that other people wouldn't. And like he was going to do things that would get results faster. And people were like, well, this is working. Like, I just don't necessarily see the link between like him having to be all of these things between the results that he was getting, the followers that he had. Like, I think there are many things that explain him with that power and like people following him. Like he was getting results. And I think that is something that clearly mattered, as Blake like states multiple times, like it was working.
Yeah, but even that argument, like, oh, it was working. Look at him.
Well, look at him now. Yeah, obviously now. But I mean, for like why he had followers before this, like clearly now he's nothing.
Right, but if the argument is like he was always this way, that's hard for me to follow because I see him as he is now, and I'm like, well, wait, why did anyone listen? Do you know what I mean? It's just like, okay, he didn't change from being charismatic to not being charismatic. He was always this kind of shitty version of himself, and then I'm like, okay, well. I mean, Ilia follows him. The White Fang follows him. The people that were loyal to Sienna turn on her to follow him. But he's like this piece of shit. Like, okay, I guess.
I think a lot of this ties back into two things, which is one, the poor execution of the White Fang plotline overall.
That's definitely true.
And two, RWBY telling but not showing, because I think everything Erin is talking about is stuff that is effectively told but maybe not effectively shown, and the White Fang plotline as a whole makes Adam like the fact that like that whole plotline is all telling and no showing, where all of the White Fang's like struggle for civil rights and for like dignity for the faunus essentially happens in exposition. We never see any of the actual, like, good stuff that the White Fang does. We just get told about it and then watch them act as disposable mooks for Roman and other villains. That, I think, takes away from potential that Adam would have as a character. We actually get a little bit of that in the Adam character short, where we see him sort of establishing himself as a leader within the White Fang and gaining his followers and how he went about doing that. And that's the kind of stuff I wish we saw a little bit more of in the show, because I think that would communicate, even if the point you want to make is he's not necessarily like more powerful than everyone else. He's not necessarily like, super charismatic or brilliant. He's just louder and willing to go places other people aren't. That's still something where I think like you have to do that work because the writers aren't doing it for you, where it's one of those things where you can put the dots together, but there's a lot that's not there. And I think that's sort of the piece that like Allie and Pug are missing here, is that you wanna see that on screen in a way that we don't get it.
Yeah, I definitely think that RWBY is a show that asks its viewers to do a lot of work.
Yes.
Definitely. I've said, like, I've thought before, like, I wish Adam just didn't talk. Because, like, one of the things that I think is compelling for you, or not, I guess not compelling, but Erin, you're talking about it, where his actions are, like, very much like the thing I think the White Fang likes about him, where he's a very powerful person and he gets stuff done with his, like, strength. But every single time he talks, it's not only, like, off-putting, it's like I actively just dislike it, because it's so like there's such a disconnect between his actions, where he is like using his strength for like the White Fang's goal, and then his when he speaks, he's saying, no, it's all about Blake, and like it's all about my petty ex, like messy romance history. Like there's just such a disconnect between like this really powerful person, and he's like only using it for himself in actuality, but he's also the leader of an organization where he can't be doing stuff like that if he's like supposed to be this charismatic figure. So there's just like a bad like contrast between those two.
And I think the idea of like someone who isn't necessarily super charismatic rising to power because he hits these certain notes for this group of people. Like, that is something you can do, but I think in order to pull that off, we, the audience, have to be able to get in the mindset of his followers. We have to see what they see in him to some extent, even if we know fundamentally it's fake and he actually sucks. And the show never does that because the Faunus plotline is so poorly handled.
And like I was talking about this while I was watching it, but like I almost feel for like Carrie Miles in a way, because obviously like this plot line was not started by white people. Like obviously Monty was not white. So you know what I mean? So I always was like, God, very difficult for them to be left with at this point in time.
Yeah. Adam is yet another side effect of Miles and Carrie being the just found out about racism, damn this shit sucks guys. It's tragic, but what can you do? Shikata Ganai. All right, this podcast has been going for like 2:45, so we gotta wrap this shit up. Final thoughts. Pug.
Volume 5, not very good. Ilia is the best girl, so it's worth it for her.
Yes. Maria.
Yeah, this is just a not great volume. There's a lot of build-up for not a lot of reward.
Erin.
Sentimental value. Rewatching is a little tough. It's okay.
And Allie.
Yeah, obviously has a lot of problems. I still think there are some high points, especially with like Blake's arc. I will say that I think a lot of problems that happen in Volume 5 get a lot better in Volume 6. So definitely push through. Because like, Volume 6, I think, does a great job moving the plot forward, giving characters more satisfying arcs in them, and then just like gets a lot better overall after this.
And we'll get into all the ways that Volume 6 picks up the pace again and gets the show back on track in the next episode. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching and or listening to this podcast. Really appreciate the continued support, and we will see you all next time. Say bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.